There is an episode of Adventure Time called Free Buckets, which aired on the 21st of July 2017, in which a creature made entirely of grass realizes he is not the boy he believed himself to be, and is killed by accident while trying to take over that boy's life. His name is Fern. He was born from a cursed sword and a careless wish, and for the brief year and a half he existed, he carried the certainty that he was Finn the human, the show's protagonist. He was not. He was a copy. The show did not soften that. His remains were gathered into a bucket by a man wearing a small, glowing purple ring. The man was not interested in saving him. He was interested in using him. That is the kind of story Adventure Time kept telling, quietly in episodes that were 11 minutes long. There are dozens of them. Underneath the surface of this show, beneath the talking dog and the boy with the bear hat and the candy princess, runs a 1,000-year story that the show released in fragments. It involves an antiquarian who bought a strange crown in northern Scandinavia and lost his fiancée to it the same evening. It involves a half-demon child who survived the end of human civilization by hiding inside a wrecked school. It involves an ice elemental who lived 65 million years ago, and the apprentice he refused to teach. Before we go further, a small note. Long-form essays like this take time to put together, and subscribing to the channel quietly helps the next one happen. It is free, it takes about 3 seconds, and you can do it without opening your eyes. Now, back to it. None of what we are about to walk through is told in order in the original show. It is told sideways. A song lyric here, a photograph on a desk there, a 12-second flashback in an episode that is supposedly about something else entirely. The viewer is asked, gently and without instruction, to assemble the timeline from those fragments. Tonight is for taking some of those fragments and placing them carefully next to each other, slowly, in the quiet without demanding anything from you. We will begin with the most useful thread to pull, which is the man inside the king. The most consequential single moment in Adventure Time's prehistory happened in the early 21st century, in a coastal town in northern Scandinavia, in a small antique shop, or possibly on a dock, and was witnessed only by the two people involved. One of them was a man named Simon Petrikov. The other was a dock worker whose name we are never given. The shop is never named. The town is never named. The country is never specified beyond northern Scandinavia, which the audience must infer from a single sentence buried inside the home movie footage that appears in Season 3, Episode 20, an episode called Holly Jolly Secrets, which originally aired on the 5th of December 2011. The transaction at the center of all this, the moment a kind, unremarkable, slightly nervous antiquarian handed over what was probably a relatively small amount of money for what looked like a slightly damaged, slightly tarnished, slightly heavier than it should have been gold and jewel crown, is the moment that almost every disaster in the rest of the timeline traces back to. The Mushroom War did not need that crown to happen. The Lich's arrival did not need that crown to happen. But everything that happens to Marceline, everything that happens to Finn, everything that happens to Princess Bubblegum's relationship with one of the people closest to her, and 1,000 years of magical winter weather across an entire continent of the post-apocalyptic Earth, all of it traces back to a quiet sale that probably took about 90 seconds. Simon Petrikov was an antiquarian, which means he studied and collected old things. He was engaged to a woman named Betty Groff. We know what she looked like because in the video diary he keeps making after the crown begins to take hold of him, he shows the camera a photograph of the two of them together. She is pretty. He is wearing glasses. He looks happy in the way that people look happy when they are not thinking about being happy. They were going to be married. The wedding is referenced several times across the run of the show, always indirectly, always in a way that suggests it was something both of them had wanted for a long time. We do not know how long they had been together. We do not know the date that had been set. We know only that the crown got there first. The way it began, in Simon's own telling, was small. He brought the crown home. He showed it to Betty. He put it on his head jokingly, as a man might put on any odd object he has just acquired, expecting to elicit a laugh, expecting nothing else to happen, expecting to take it off in 3 seconds and slide it back into its case. He did not slide it back into its case. He started seeing things. He started hearing things. He started, in his own description, fighting with the things he was seeing, then shouting at them when he realized they were not real, then realizing slowly, in the way you might realize a piece of bad news has actually arrived, that the source of the visions was the thing on his head. When he finally took it off, he found Betty standing across the room looking at him. And what Simon remembers of that moment is the expression on her face. He calls it contempt. Whatever he had done while the crown was on, whatever he had said, whatever he had become, the woman he had been about to marry was no longer the woman he had been about to marry. By the time he is recording this part of the tape, he is alone, his apartment is messy, and he is increasingly cold. The home movie segment of Holly Jolly Secrets is one of the most devastating sequences in the entire show, and it is structured almost entirely as decay. Each successive tape was recorded later than the last. In the first ones, Simon still looks like Simon. He still has his glasses. He still has the affect of a young academic. By the third or fourth tape, his skin has begun to turn blue, which he documents on camera with a kind of clinical horror. By the fifth, his hair has begun to whiten. By the seventh, he is no longer entirely sure he knows which century he is living in. The crown, he is starting to understand, is doing more than projecting visions. It is rewriting him. The body is changing. The voice is dropping. The mind is shedding pieces of itself in the order most useful to whatever the crown wants. The last reasonably coherent thing Simon says, before the final tape shows what is clearly the Ice King from the present day of the show grinning at the camera, is a plea. He asks whoever finds these tapes to please forgive him, because he is not in control of what he does when he wears it, and he has begun to suspect that one day there will be no version of him left that is not the crown. He is right. The thing the show takes a long time to confirm, because it never confirms anything in a hurry, is that there is a small window of time between when Simon bought the crown and when he became unrecoverable, during which the world he had been living in ended. Simon is human. His apartment is in a major city. The footage shows airplanes flying over modern buildings, and in some shots, what looks suspiciously like a warplane. The reasonable inference, and the one the writers have allowed in interviews, is that the Mushroom War, the nuclear conflict that wiped out human civilization on Earth and reset the planet for the magical post-apocalypse the show takes place in, happened during the period covered by Simon's tapes. He was already losing himself when the bombs began. By the time he comes out the other side of all of it, he is no longer human. The crown has taken his name, his fiancée, his shape, his face, his voice, his glasses, his profession, his time period. He is, by the present day of the show, 1,000 years old and goes by Ice King. He kidnaps princesses, he talks to penguins, he has lost almost every piece of who Simon Petrikov was, including the memory of having ever been him. There is one thing the crown could not take, although it tried. About 600 episodes of context here, condensed into a single sentence. At some point in the centuries after the Mushroom War, while Simon was still partially himself and partially the king, he met a small child wandering the radioactive ruins of what had been human civilization. She was half demon, half human, terrified, and alone. He took care of her. He carried her on his shoulders, he sang to her, he gave her a stuffed bear named Hambo. He kept her alive for as long as he could before the crown took the rest of him. The child's name was Marceline. She is, by the present day of the show, also 1,000 years old, and she remembers him. The crown could not erase Marceline's memory, so even when Simon stopped recognizing himself, there was one person walking around the post-apocalyptic Earth who still recognized him. The episode that finally lets the audience understand this is called I Remember You. It aired in late 2012. It is set entirely in the Ice King's apartment in the present day of the show. He arrives at Marceline's house unannounced. He has been bothering her for what is implied to be a long time. He has written her a song, although he does not remember why. He thinks they should be a band. Marceline, who is more patient with him than anyone in OO has any right to expect, reluctantly sits down at the piano. He has the lyrics in a small water-damaged notebook. The lyrics, when she reads them, are not the lyrics of a man trying to flirt with her. They are the lyrics of a man 1,000 years gone, asking her to remember him because he cannot remember himself, and apologizing for things he no longer knows he did. Marceline cries while she sings them. Ice King does not understand why she is crying. He is happy, he thinks they are making a song. The episode does not explain anything. It just shows you two characters in the same room, one of whom is dying and does not know it, and the other, one is the only person on the planet who knows he is dying. It ends with Marceline showing him a photograph from before. He does not recognize the man in the photograph. The man in the photograph is him. There is another episode 2 seasons later called Simon and Marcy, which is harder to describe and which a lot of people consider the single best episode the show ever made. It takes place entirely in the period right after the Mushroom War. Marceline is around 7 years old. Simon is somewhere in the middle of the long fall, still mostly himself, but already slipping. The world around them is gray, melted, dangerous. There are mutated humans. There is no food. The two of them are walking on foot across what appears to be a continent in search of safe shelter. They sing to each other. They make jokes neither of them really finds funny anymore. Simon tells Marceline he is going to take care of her until she is grown. He is wrong about this, and he knows it. He uses the crown sparingly when there are monsters. Each time he uses it, he forgets a little more. There is a long sequence where they sit by a campfire and he tries gently to explain to her what is happening to him, in language a 7-year-old half-demon child might understand. He fails. She does not entirely understand. She is too young. He tells her that no matter what he becomes, he loves her, and he tells her not to forget him. She does not forget. She spends the next 990 years not forgetting. That is the contract of the show. That is the engine that makes the entire thing work. Now we need to talk about where the crown came from, because that is where this gets stranger. The crown was not made in northern Scandinavia. It only ended up there. The crown was made approximately 65 million years before Simon Petrikov was born, during the late Cretaceous period, on a planet that, in the Adventure Time universe, was already populated not just by dinosaurs, but by a small handful of magical beings called elementals. We learned this in an episode called Evergreen, which originally aired on the 15th of January, 2015, in the United States, and which is one of the show's most unsettlingly large lore drops. The episode opens with the Ice King in present-day U, jumping on his bed in his sleep, shouting a single sentence over and over again, in evident distress. The sentence is, "Gunther, no." He does not know why. The episode then cuts to the actual reason, 65 million years earlier. There was an ice elemental named Urgence Evergreen. He had a tower, he had a sword, he had a long flowing white beard, and he wore a blue cloak with golden gauntlets. And from a distance, he looked very much like a slimmer, healthier version of who Simon would eventually become. He was the elemental of ice. There were 3 others of his rank, each of them embodying one of the 4 base substances the Adventure Time universe is built out of. Their names were Chatsberry, who was candy, Balthus, who was fire, and Slimy D, who was slime. Together, the 4 of them maintained the elemental balance of the planet. They did not get along particularly well. Evergreen was arrogant. Balthus was a flame. Chatsberry was placid in the way candy is. Slimy D was a slime. But they were the only beings on the planet old enough or powerful enough to deal with what was about to hit Earth, which was a comet. The other 3 elementals did not think the comet was a problem. They said it was nothing. They said comets came through occasionally and rarely did lasting damage. Evergreen, however, saw something the other 3 did not. The comet was emitting a sickening green light. The comet had what looked very much like horns. The comet was not a comet. It was something that had been thrown at the Earth by something for a reason none of the elementals were going to live long enough to find out. Evergreen knew this, and he was the only one. He proposed they pool their magic to forge an artifact powerful enough to obliterate the thing before it landed. The other 3 refused, so Evergreen, who was not a patient elemental, froze them. He froze his 3 colleagues solid. He left them to thaw later, if there happened to be a later. And then he set out to build the crown by himself. The crown that he built, and it is important to understand because almost nothing else in the entire show makes sense without it, was not just an artifact, it was a wish-granting device. The first being to wear it would have its deepest, most truthful internal wish granted, with all of the power Evergreen could pour into it, regardless of what else might be happening. The plan was simple. When the comet got close enough, Evergreen would put the crown on his own head, wish for the destruction of the comet, and the crown would grant that wish. The comet would shatter, the planet would survive. Evergreen would have saved his colleagues and his world. He needed 3 magical rubies to power the crown, which he and his apprentice retrieved at considerable cost. Then he went back to his tower. Then everything went wrong. The apprentice's name was Gunther. He was a small green theropod dinosaur who had been magically uplifted by Evergreen for the purpose of serving as his apprentice, and who was treated, throughout the entire episode, less like an apprentice and more like a slave. Evergreen ordered him around. Evergreen never taught him magic. Evergreen yelled at him constantly. When the 2 of them returned to the tower with the rubies, a magma beast that had been hunting them tracked them home. The beast attacked, the tower started to collapse. Evergreen was pinned under falling stone, unable to reach the crown. The comet was minutes away. There was only one being left in the room who could put the crown on. It was Gunther. Evergreen, dying under the rubble, told the dinosaur exactly what to do. Put on the crown, wish for the destruction of the comet. Use these specific words. Focus your mind on the comet. Save the world. Gunther put on the crown. The crown read his mind. The crown did not find a deep wish to destroy the comet. The crown found, instead, the only wish a mistreated apprentice in that moment has ever had, which is the wish to be like the master who has refused to teach him. The crown granted that wish. Gunther's skin turned blue. His hair grew long and white. His tail disappeared. His nose grew. His eyes hollowed. The crown morphed him, slowly in front of his dying master, into a smaller copy of Evergreen. And then the crown locked itself to that pattern, forever. Every future wearer of the crown would, over time, be reshaped into a small copy of Evergreen. By the dinosaur's wish, while the dinosaur in his final seconds of existence screamed the only piece of language Evergreen had ever taught him, which was the word he heard most often, which was Gunther, no. Then the comet hit. The dinosaurs went extinct, Evergreen died, Gunther died, the crown survived. 65 million years passed. The crown sat at some point much later. It ended up on Earth in the early 21st century in the hands of a dock worker in northern Scandinavia, who probably did not know what he was selling. The dock worker sold the crown to Simon Petrikov, who was an antiquarian. Simon put it on his head for a laugh. The crown read his mind. The crown was still locked to the template Gunther had imprinted on it 65 million years earlier. Simon's hair began to whiten, his skin began to turn blue, his nose began to lengthen. The pattern of want to be like Evergreen had become, by then, a pattern that simply rewrote the wearer into an Evergreen-shaped person. The Ice King. The figure who, in the present of the show, kidnaps princesses and writes bad fanfiction and talks to penguins, is what happens when you put the crown on a kind, soft-spoken Jewish antiquarian named Simon Petrikov, and leave him in it for 1,000 years. He is the crown's resolution of its own template. He calls his penguins Gunther because the dinosaur is, in some sense, still in there. He calls his princesses Princess because Betty was his princess. He cannot remember why he does either of these things. There is one more layer, and it is the saddest one, and it does not get confirmed until the very end of the show. By the time the series finale arrives on the 3rd of September 2018, in a 44-minute special called Come Along With Me, it has become quietly understood by the audience that the crown is not just a magic object. It is in some sense an extension of something else, something larger, something that does not have a name in any human language. In the finale, an eldritch entity named Golb is briefly summoned to the land of U by accident. Golb is not from this universe. Golbi does not operate by the rules of meaning or language. Golbi exists outside of structure. And when Golbi shows up, the crown, Simon's crown, the one he has been wearing for 1,000 years, reacts to it. The implication, never stated directly but obvious from the geometry of the scene, is that the crown was never really an ice elemental artifact. It was a tuning fork. It was a piece of gold that had fallen, at some point in deep cosmic time, into the world. Evergreen had reshaped it. Gunther had imprinted on it. But the underlying power was something far older. The reason it could grant a wish at all was that it was a sliver of something that exists outside the laws of cause and effect. And the reason it took Simon so long to come back was that the part of him that was being eaten by something that existed outside the universe. In the finale, Simon does come back. Briefly, Betty, who has reappeared in the present day of the show by means we will get to in a later section, is in love with him still, and in love with what he was, and she has spent 800 years of magical lifespan trying to fix him. She finally manages it by performing a sacrifice. She uses the crown, in the moment Golb is in the room, to merge herself with Golb, sending the entity back where it came from and pulling herself with it. The crown falls off of Simon's head. Simon, blue-skinned, white-bearded, sane for the first time in 1,000 years, looks around the wreckage of the battlefield, registers that the woman he was going to marry has just sacrificed herself to save him, and starts to weep. He is the only person in U who has lost the same person twice. The crown falls. The crown is picked up by a penguin named Gunther, who has been a constant companion of Simon's for centuries. Gunther, sensing what is in the crown, looks at Simon, and quietly in front of the camera, places the crown on his own head. Gunther becomes the new Ice King. The cycle starts again. Simon walks away. Of all the stories the show tells, this is the one the show keeps coming back to. The crown, the man, the woman, the cycle, the cost. None of it is necessary to enjoy Adventure Time. None of it is referenced in the opening credits. None of it is what the show is supposedly about. But all of it is there. And if you sit with the show long enough, in the right order, what you start to feel is not the plot but the weight of a 1,000-year-old apology, said quietly by a man who no longer remembers what he is apologizing for. The next thread we are going to pull is the one Marceline keeps walking around with. Marceline Abadir was born approximately 1,000 years before the present of the show begins, in the months or years after the Mushroom War. Her mother was a human woman. Her father is a being called Hunson Abadir, who is the ruler of the Nightosphere, which the show treats as one of several adjacent demonic dimensions. Marceline is therefore half human and half demon, which is the form in which we meet her in the first season, although she has by then been a vampire for several centuries and has the appearance of an 18-year-old woman with grayish skin, long black hair, and small fangs. We need to walk through her timeline more carefully than that, because almost everything about her is built out of moments the show only shows you once. The earliest period of her life that we see is the period covered by the episode Simon and Marcy, which we have already discussed, and a small handful of others. She is a small child, possibly around the age of 6 or 7, when the Mushroom War ends and the world she had presumably been born into ceases to exist. Her mother is by then almost certainly already dead. Her father, Hunson, is not present and may or may not have known she existed at this stage. She is being looked after in the months and years after the war by Simon Petrikov, who at this stage is still largely himself, although he is already showing signs that he is not going to remain so. The two of them wander the destroyed continent. They survive, they sing, they argue about food in the way an adult and a child argue about food. They build small fires, they tell each other small jokes. Simon teaches her a song called the Fry Song, which is a song her father, when he eventually meets her, will misinterpret in a way that will haunt her for several centuries. The teddy bear is given to her by Simon in this period. It is a small, slightly battered, button-eyed brown bear, and Simon names it Hambo, which is a name with no clear meaning but which we are told he liked the sound of. Marceline names it after him. The bear is hers. It will, eventually, become the single most important object in her life that she did not make herself. She will lose it more than once, she will get it back, she will lose it again. She will, in one of the most painful sequences in the show, voluntarily give it away to a being who could give her back something she has wanted longer. At some point during this period, Simon's deterioration accelerates to the point that he can no longer take care of her. The crown begins to win. He leaves Marceline. He is sorry about it. She does not entirely understand why he has to. She lives for a while alone. She is, at this point, somewhere between 7 and 10 years old. Most of human civilization is rubble. Most of the survivors of human civilization are not the kind of survivors a small child wants to be near. She is being hunted, in some general sense, by almost everything. She is half demon, which gives her some advantages, but she is still a child and she is still alone. This is the period in which she meets her father for the first time, in the way the show wants you to understand it. The episode is called Memory of a Memory, which originally aired on the 16th of May, 2011. It is structured as a dream walk. Finn and Jake have to enter Marceline's mind to retrieve a piece of trapped magic, and as they do, they walk through her oldest memories in reverse. The deepest one is small. She is a child. She is sitting on the cracked steps of a destroyed building, holding her bear, eating fries out of a paper bag. Her father, Hunson, appears in front of her. He is a tall, gaunt, gray-skinned demon. He is hungry. He does not appear to know she is his daughter, although the show is ambiguous about this. He looks at her fries, he looks at her, he takes the fries, he eats them, he leaves. She does not say anything. She watches him go. It is one of the smallest cruelties in any show ever made for children. It is also one of the most important pieces of foundational pain in the entire timeline of Adventure Time. The Fry Song, which Marceline writes much later and which is one of her most played songs in the show, is the song she wrote as an adult about that moment. The lyrics are almost too direct to bear. She is asking her father why he ate the fries that belonged to her. She is asking him whether he knew, when he took them, that they were the only food she had. She is asking him whether anything she ever does will ever be enough for him to look at her. The Fry Song is, on its surface, a comic bit. The Ice King hears it once and tries to perform it from his bad notebook, and it is, in his hands, ridiculous. But the song itself is one of the most exact pieces of trauma documentation that has ever been written into a cartoon. And what makes it work is that Marceline almost never sings it directly. It just lives in her, the way the bear lives in her, the way the song Simon wrote her lives in her. And every once in a while, on a quiet night, with the right friend in the room, it comes out. The next major hinge in Marceline's life happens at some point in her teens, although the show is deliberately vague about how old she was. She becomes a vampire. The miniseries Stakes, which aired across 4 consecutive nights from the 16th to the 19th of November, 2015, walks the audience through the entire arc of her vampire history. In a sequence of 8 back-to-back episodes that constitute the largest single block of Marceline-specific lore the show ever released at once. The cold open of that arc is structured around her, in the present, asking Princess Bubblegum to cure her of her vampirism. The reason she gives is one of the simplest and saddest pieces of dialogue in the show. She tells Bubblegum that when she became a vampire, she was just a messed up kid. She tells her she did it because she was alone. and because she had been hurt, and because she had wanted a kind of power that nobody could take from her. And she tells her that now, 1,000 years later, she is still that messed up kid, and the vampirism has not fixed it, and she wants to grow up and grow old like a normal person, and she does not want to be the same person forever. The cure works, briefly. While she is recovering from it, 5 vampires emerge from her body, freed from the curse she was carrying inside her. The curse she had been carrying in some sense since the original event that had turned her. These 5 vampires are the original cohort she had hunted, defeated, and absorbed into herself 800 years earlier. The Empress, who hypnotizes with her eyes, the Hierophant, who is composed and patient and old, the Fool, who is impulsive and easy to kill and surprisingly bad at being a vampire, the Moon, who is luminous and beautiful and dangerous, and the Vampire King himself, who is, in every way that matters, the oldest and worst of them. The miniseries follows Marceline, Princess Bubblegum, Finn, Jake, and a now newly mortal Marceline as they hunt and restake these 5 across the post-apocalyptic landscape, in the same order Marceline had originally hunted them in. We get flashbacks for each one. We see how she fought them, we see what she lost. By the end of the miniseries, 4 of them have been restaked. The last one, the Vampire King, has gone full lion and is sitting calmly in a cave, waiting for her. The scene in which Marceline confronts the Vampire King is short. He is not surprised to see her. He does not want to fight. He tells her, gently, that he is glad she has become mortal. He tells her he never wanted to be the Vampire King, and that the thing inside him, a sentient cloud of darkness called the Dark Cloud, had been the thing turning everyone for centuries, with him as its puppet. He tells her she is the only being who has ever been strong enough to defeat the cloud. She does not want to. She is, by this point in the miniseries, exhausted. She is in love with Bubblegum. She wants to be done. The Vampire King releases the Dark Cloud, knowing that she is the only one who can absorb it. She has a choice. She can absorb the cloud, which means becoming a vampire again, permanently, after 800 years, or she can let the cloud go free, which means it will eventually find another host, and 1,000 more years of vampirism will return to O. She absorbs it. She becomes the Vampire Queen again. The Vampire King dies, finally, gratefully, in front of her. She walks home. The last scene of the Stakes miniseries is, in some ways, the entire show in miniature. Marceline, now permanently a vampire again, climbs into Princess Bubblegum's lap and falls asleep. Bubblegum holds her. Nothing is said. The screen fades, a song plays. The song is called Everything Stays, which is written for the miniseries by a former Adventure Time storyboard artist named Rebecca Sugar, who would later go on to create Steven Universe, and which is one of the most quietly devastating pieces of music ever placed inside an animated television show. The chorus is built around a single line that Marceline's mother had said to her in the months before the war, when Marceline was still very small. The line is that everything stays right where you left it, but everything also changes gradually, and that is okay. The song is sung by Marceline to her own younger self. It is also sung by Marceline's mother to her. It is also sung in some sense by the show to its audience, which has by this point been watching for 5.5 years. Everything stays. Everything also changes. That is the contract. The miniseries ends. The credits roll. There is one more piece of Marceline's life we need to mention here, because it is the piece that the original series finale finally lets us close. For most of the run of the show, Marceline's most important non-romantic relationship is not with Simon, who is not with her father, who is largely absent, and is not with Finn, who is 14. It is with Princess Bubblegum, who is 18 on the surface but somewhere between 800 and 1,000 years old underneath, depending on how you count. The two of them have been close for at least 150 years in the implied timeline. They have been a couple. They have broken up, they have tried to remain friends, they have spent decades pretending the breakup did not happen. The show, in its main run, never lets either of them say what they were to each other, although it gets closer and closer with each season, and by the final season is essentially saying it out loud without using the specific word. In the series finale, in a quiet moment in the middle of an apocalyptic battle, Marceline finally says it out loud, in the form of a kiss, and the show finally confirms it. The kiss happens in the foreground of a frame that is otherwise filled with a 40-foot-tall sentient cube of cosmic chaos breathing down on the entire land of Oo. The show lets the kiss take its time anyway. 2 years later, in a follow-up special called Obsidian, which aired on the 19th of November, 2020, as part of the Distant Lands miniseries, the show finally lets Marceline tell Bonnie Bell everything. The two of them, alone in a desert at the bottom of a glass mountain, talking. Marceline tells her about the music, about her mother, about the 1,000 years, about the bear, about the man inside the king, about all of it. There is a song in the middle of it called Monster, which is one of the saddest songs Olivia Olson has ever performed for the show, and which most listeners cannot get through on the first listen. The song is, on its surface, Marceline asking Bonnibel to forgive her for being a monster. Underneath, it is a 1,000-year-old vampire queen finally being able to say to one other person that the reason she has spent her entire adult life standing slightly apart from everyone she loves is that she has been afraid that being known is the same as being eaten. Bonnibel forgives her. The song ends. The two of them walk out of the desert together. That is the closest Marceline ever comes to being unhaunted, and the show, which is generous to her in a way it is generous to almost no one else, lets it stand. We will come back to Bonnibel later in her own section, because there is more to her than has yet been mentioned, and because the kingdom she rules is built on top of things the show has been quietly trying to tell you about since the second season. But for now, we leave Marceline where the show leaves her, which is somewhere safe with someone who knows her, for the first time in a very long time. The next thread is the comet. The Adventure Time universe, the show eventually confirms, runs on a cosmic cycle. Every 1,000 years, a comet, or what looks like a comet, arrives in the inner solar system and grazes the Earth. The comet is not exactly a comet. It is what the show calls a catalyst comet. It is a vehicle. It is a kind of cosmic egg or a kind of cosmic delivery system, depending on how you want to translate the metaphor. Each time it arrives, it carries a consciousness. The consciousness uses the comet to descend, take on a form, walk around for a while, and then ascend again when the next pass is due. Different consciousnesses use the comet at different cycles. The comet that almost hit Earth in the Cretaceous period, the one Evergreen tried to stop, carried the consciousness that eventually became the Lich. The next pass of the comet, much later, carried the consciousness that became Orgolorg, a being we will get to in a moment. The most recent pass of the comet, which happens at the very end of Season 6 of Adventure Time, carries an opportunity, one of the few in the entire show, for a character to ascend and become part of the cycle himself. The episode is called The Comet. It aired on the 5th of June 2015 and is the final episode of Season 6. It is one of the strangest single half hours the show ever produced, because it commits, for its entire runtime, to a piece of cosmic metaphysics it has barely set up. The comet is arriving. Finn, who has been having dreams about it for half the season, is at the impact site. So is Jake. So is most of the supporting cast. The comet, when it gets close, opens. Inside the comet is a small glowing being who introduces itself by speaking directly into Finn's mind. The being tells Finn that this is how it has always worked. Every 1,000 years, the comet arrives. Every 1,000 years, one being on Earth is chosen, and that being is offered the opportunity to leave its current body, ascend into the comet, become a thread in the consciousness of the universe, and travel onward. The being inside the comet was the previous one chosen. Now it is offering the offer to Finn. Finn says no. He says he likes his friends. He says he wants to grow old. He says he wants to make mistakes and have them count. The being is not offended. The being says, fine, the offer is open to anyone in the room. The being looks around. The being's gaze stops on a small penguin sitting near Finn, watching the conversation with what appears to be intelligent attention. The penguin's name is Gunter. The penguin is a constant background presence in the show. The penguin has appeared in dozens of episodes without ever doing anything especially noteworthy, except for occasionally laying an egg of cosmic horror, which the show used to play as a joke. The being inside the comet asks the penguin, "Do you want to ascend?" The penguin says yes. The penguin steps forward. The penguin's body begins to glow. The penguin's body begins to expand. The penguin's body begins to rearrange itself into something much, much larger. The penguin is not, it turns out, a penguin. The penguin is Orgolorg. The penguin is a cosmic horror that in its previous life had ridden the comet across the void of space, had been intercepted by some kind of cosmic guardian, had been compressed into the body of a penguin, and had spent millennia waiting for the next pass of the comet to break out. Orgolorg's true form is a kraken-like being with eyes that look in too many directions at once, and Orgolorg's intention is not to ascend gently into the consciousness of the universe. Orgolorg's intention is to hijack the comet and use it as a weapon to consume what is left of the planet. The being inside the comet recognizes Orgolorg and is afraid. Finn fights Orgolorg. Jake fights Orgolorg. Most of the supporting cast is briefly involved. In the end, the comet leaves with neither Finn nor Orgolorg aboard, and Orgolorg, defeated, shrinks back down into the body of a penguin and waddles off, and life continues. The point is not that Finn did not ascend, although that is a real point, and is one of the few moments in the show in which Finn explicitly chooses the life he has over the cosmic destiny on offer. The point is that the comet has been visiting Earth on a fixed schedule for at least 65 million years. The point is that the Lich came on one of those visits, and Orgolorg came on another. The point is that the cycle is older than the planet's current civilization, older than the war, older than anything the characters in the present day are equipped to understand. The point is that the comet is, in some sense, what the show is really about. The slow, indifferent, repeating motion of cosmic time, against which everything that happens to the characters is small and brief and beautiful. The show does not say this out loud. It never says anything out loud. But once you know the comet is on a schedule, you start seeing it in the background of episodes you had previously thought were about something else. While we are here, we should talk about Orgolorg more directly, because the penguin's secret identity is one of the most quietly inserted pieces of cosmic horror in any children's show ever produced. The episode that finally confirms Gunter is Orgolorg is called Gold Stars. It aired on the 13th of April, 2015. It is structured for most of its runtime as a relatively low-stakes comedy episode in which Magic Man, a character we will return to in detail in a later section, is trying to recruit a successor. Magic Man is dying, or going mad, or both, and he wants to leave his title to someone capable of carrying the weight of it. He is interviewing candidates. Most of them are wildly unqualified. At some point during the episode, Magic Man finds Gunter wandering around. Gunter is, on the surface, a small, mostly silent penguin, whose only verbal contribution is a sound that the show transcribes as wank. Magic Man, who has access to True Sight, looks at Gunter and sees for the first time what Gunter actually is. The episode then takes a hard left into cosmic horror. We get a flashback to a different period of the universe. We see Orgolorg in its original form, soaring through interstellar space in pursuit of cosmic guardian Golb. We see Orgolorg compressed against its will into the smallest, most innocuous form Golb can think of. We see Orgolorg, now a penguin, fall to Earth and crash. The crash predates the present of the show by an unspecified but enormous amount of time. From that moment until the events of the comet, Orgolorg has been waddling around, as a penguin, mostly forgotten, occasionally laying eggs that hatch into things best not described, waiting. Once you know this, the show changes shape. Every previous appearance of Gunter, every wank, every prank, every appearance in the background of an Ice King episode, every time the penguin has been treated as a joke, is from the inside. The patient waiting of a cosmic horror for the next pass of the comet. The show never makes this dramatic. It just lets it sit there. The penguin returns to its previous behavior at the end of the comet, and is treated for the remainder of the show as the same minor comic relief it had always been. But you know now, the show told you. Now we have to talk about the Lich. The Lich is one of the few characters in Adventure Time whose name the audience hears before the audience hears what he is. He is mentioned in passing in the first season. He is referenced obliquely in the second. He finally appears fully in the season 2 finale, a 2-part episode called Mortal Folly and Mortal Recoil, which originally aired in March of 2011. He arrives the show wants you to understand as the worst thing that has ever happened to the land of O. He arrives without warning, without preamble, without context. He is a skeleton-like figure with green flame in his eye sockets and antlers on his head and a long, papery, ancient body. He speaks rarely. When he speaks, his voice is the sound of an old man speaking through a mouthful of dry leaves, and the things he says are short. Fall. Die. Such a wonderful day. He has no humor. He has no rage. He has no negotiation. His one consistent characteristic is that he wants every living thing dead, and he is patient enough to wait a very long time to get what he wants. He almost gets what he wants in his first appearance by possessing Princess Bubblegum's body. The episode in which this happens, Mortal Recoil, ends with Bubblegum, who has been turned into a kind of horrific lich-shaped tree monster, being defeated and forcibly reverted to a much younger version of herself. The fight is brief. The price is high. Bubblegum spends a substantial portion of the third season as a 13-year-old, which is a piece of body horror the show plays as a comedy bit, but which, watched with adult eyes, is one of the more unsettling stretches the show ever attempts. She eventually grows back. The Lich, defeated for now, retreats. He returns. Of course he returns, the show finds him in various places across the run of the series. He is trapped at one point in the body of a small disabled boy named Sweet Pea, who is one of the kindest characters in the entire show, and who carries the Lich's essence inside him like an inherited disease. He is trapped at another point inside a multiverse-level superweapon called the Enchiridion, which Finn and Jake spend several seasons trying to keep him from accessing. He is, in some sense, never really gone. He cannot be destroyed, only contained, because what he is older than this universe. The episode that finally pulls back the camera far enough to explain him is called The Comet, the same one we already discussed. The being inside the comet, while explaining the cycle to Finn, explains that the Lich is what the comet became, eons ago, when something inside the cycle broke. The Lich was, originally, a consciousness like any other, a thread of universal awareness riding the cycle, doing what the cycle is for. At some point in cosmic history, something corrupted that thread. The being is not specific about what. The being says only that the thread became fixated on ending, and that the cycle has been trying ever since to contain it. The Lich came to Earth the way all consciousnesses come to Earth, on the comet. He was the one Evergreen had tried to stop. He was, although Evergreen did not know it, the one Gunther's failure had let in. The comet that hit the Earth during the KPG extinction event, 65 million years ago, in the Adventure Time universe, did not just kill the dinosaurs, it brought down the Lich, who has been sleeping inside the radioactive ruin of the planet ever since, occasionally stirring, waiting for the conditions to be right. The Mushroom War, when it came, was the conditions being right. The Lich woke up. The Lich began to walk. That is the long answer to the question of why he appeared when he did. The short answer is that the Mushroom War woke him up. He is in a real sense the radiation. He is the half-life of every weapon ever fired in the war. He is the consequence of human civilization's last act, given form. And the reason the show makes the Lich of all the antagonists feel so much worse than the others is that the Lich is not evil in the way a villain is evil. The Lich is the simple mathematical, indifferent extrapolation of what a planet looks like when its dominant species has decided to kill itself. He is what the show is afraid of. He is the only character in the entire run whose dialogue the show treats as actually frightening. There is one more piece. The being inside the comet, in the comet, tells Finn that one possible outcome of the cycle is that a being good enough, kind enough, patient enough, could ascend and could, over time, replace the Lich in the cycle. The Lich would, in that scenario, finally be allowed to rest. The being is not certain whether Finn is that being. Finn is 14. Finn has, by this point in the show, already saved the world several times. Finn might be. The being does not push it. The being leaves the question open. Finn declines. The cycle continues. The comet leaves. Somewhere, in the dark, the Lich is still sleeping. Now we have to talk about the other thing the show is quietly built on top of, which is Golb. Golb is harder to write about than any of the other entities in the show, because the show is careful not to give the audience a clear handle on what Golb is. Golb is mentioned by name in the show for the first time in an episode called Puhoi, which aired on the 8th of April 2013, although the reference is so brief that almost no one in the audience caught it on first viewing. Finn falls into a pillow fort, ends up in a pocket dimension, lives an entire other life there with a wife and children, and finally falls back into his original body. As he falls, he tumbles past a number of strange entities, one of which is a large, cube-like, multi-eyed creature with a sad mouth. The creature does not interact with him. The show does not name it. It would take 3 more seasons before the audience would understand what they had just seen. The next major Golb reference comes in an episode called You Forgot Your Floaties, which aired on the 11th of December 2014. The episode is, on the surface, about a character named Magic Man, who has been mentioned across the show as one of the most powerful and most insane wizards in OO. Magic Man is a wizard from Mars who came to Earth at some point in the distant past, and who has spent most of the time since then performing increasingly cruel pranks on the people around him. He is, in his first appearances, played mostly for comedy. He is the kind of villain who turns a man into a footstool for 2 seasons, and then turns him back and then forgets why he had done it in the first place. The episode You Forgot Your Floaties pulls the camera back from Magic Man and shows us why he became what he became. He had a wife. Her name was Margles. He loved her. He loved her in a way the show, in its handling of Magic Man, almost never lets us see directly. They lived on Mars. He was already powerful, but he was, with her, not particularly destructive. He used his magic to make her laugh. He used his magic to bring her presents. They were, by all available evidence, happy. And then Golb came. Golb did not announce itself. Golb did not negotiate. Golb simply arrived in the way Golb arrives, in the form of a sound that the universe could not entirely contain. Magic Man and Margles were standing on a hill on Mars. Golb passed over them. When Golb was gone, so was Margles. There was no body. There was no goodbye. The space where Margles had been was empty, in the specific way that things are empty after they have been unmade rather than merely killed. Magic Man, who had until that point been a relatively powerful wizard, broke. He broke in the specific way that a man breaks when the universe has informed him, without explanation, that the rules he had been operating under are not the rules. The episode reveals that everything Magic Man has done since, every prank, every cruelty, every cracked behavior, has been the splintered output of a mind that is still trying to understand what happened to him. He has spent 800 years trying to find a way to bring Margles back. He has, so far, failed. The reason he has failed is that Golb does not work the way magic works. Golb does not work the way physics works. Golb does not work the way anything works. Golb exists outside the categories that allow undoing. Golb is not from this universe. The show eventually implies, although it does not state outright, that Golb is older than this universe. Golb exists in a kind of conceptual space that the show calls, by necessity, outside. Golb does not have a body in the way the comet's consciousness has a body. Golb does not have intentions in the way the Lich has intentions. Golb is instead the principle of dissolution. Wherever Golb goes, language fails. Wherever Golb goes, structure unravels. Wherever Golb goes, meaning becomes optional. The reason the crown, Simon's crown, works at all is that it was, at some unspecified ancient moment, touched by Golb. The crown is a fragment. The crown is, in some sense, a small piece of gold that has fallen into the world and been put into a shape. That is why the crown's wishes work. That is why the crown rewrites its wearer. That is why Simon, who is a kind, soft-spoken human being, became a 1,000-year-old maniac. The crown was made by Evergreen, but the power inside the crown was already there, and Evergreen was only borrowing. This is also why Betty's eventual sacrifice in the series finale works the way it does. Betty, Simon's fiancée, the woman he lost in his apartment in northern Scandinavia in the early 21st century, was of course also human. She also lived through the Mushroom War in some sense, by means we will get to. By the present of the show, she has been a major background presence for several seasons, having traveled forward in time to find Simon and discovered that he was no longer Simon. She has, in her own way, gone mad. She has acquired Magic Man's powers. She has become a wizard. She has spent her own version of the 800 years trying to find a way to fix what was done to Simon. In the series finale, when Golb is accidentally summoned to Oo by means we will discuss in a moment, Betty finally sees a way. She takes Simon's crown. She uses it as a focusing lens. She wishes, with everything she has, for Golb to be sent back where it came from, and for Simon to be returned to her. The crown grants her wish, in a way. Golb is sent back. The crown's piece of Golb is sent back with it. Simon is freed, Betty is not. She merges with Golb. She becomes part of it. The implication, never spoken, is that she has chosen to become the principle of dissolution itself, in order to keep Simon out of it. She vanishes into the entity. The entity leaves. Simon stands in the ruined battlefield, alive for the first time in 1,000 years, alone in the way he was the night the crown took her the first time. That is the cost of gold, and the cost of the crown, and the cost of the whole long story the show has been telling about Simon Petrikov since the 3rd season. The cost, finally, is paid. The way Golb ended up being summoned to Oo is its own small story, and it is worth telling because it involves another character we have not yet talked about in detail. Her name is Betty, as discussed, but the spell that summoned Golb was cast by accident, in the middle of a different operation. Betty had been trying to get Simon back. She had reasoned that Simon was at this point more crowned than man, and that the only way to free him from the crown was to summon something more powerful than the crown to extract its grip on him. She did not know when she set up the spell that what she was summoning was the entity the crown was a piece of. She did not know that summoning Golb to O would be the spiritual equivalent of opening a door inside a submarine. She found out when she cast the spell. By that time, it was too late. Golb was already arriving. Golb arrives in the finale not as a body but as a shape in the air. The animation team's choices for how to render Golb are among the most discussed in the show's production history. The figure is roughly cubic, multi-eyed, half-translucent, with a downturned mouth that seems to express something between sadness and indifference. The creature does not move so much as occupy space. Wherever Golb looks, the rules of the world get less reliable. The land of Oo in those final minutes of the show becomes a place where the laws of physics are slightly negotiable, and where every character on screen seems to be at risk not of dying, but of becoming gradually less true. The fight against Golb is not won by force. The show is explicit about this. The fight is won by music. Specifically, it is won by BMO, the small video game console, who has been one of the show's main characters since the first season, singing a small, quiet, somewhat childish song while sitting on Simon's chest inside Golb's stomach. The song is called Time Adventure. It is one of the simplest pieces of music in the show's catalog. The lyrics are about how time is an illusion that helps things make sense, and how everything that ever happens has, in some sense, already happened, and how the present is just the part of the past we have not lived yet. The song spreads through Golb. It opens a hole in Golb's interior. Simon escapes through it. The crown in the same moment is on Simon's head, and Betty, with everything she has, finishes her spell, and the crown becomes the lens, and Golb is sent back, and Betty is taken with it. The song does not stop playing. The credits roll eventually over a quiet shot of two children, much later finding the tree that grew from Fern's seed and climbing it to the top to pull out a sword. That is the finale. That is Golb. That is what was waiting at the end of the show. There is one more thing we need to say about Magic Man, because the show does eventually let him have something like a resting place, and it is one of the more generous gestures the show makes in its final stretch. Magic Man, having spent 800 years trying to find a way to bring Margles back, finally accepts, in the very late seasons, that he is not going to. He gives up the title, he passes the role of Grandmaster Wizard to Betty, briefly, and then, by way of one final ritual, walks away from Magic altogether. By the time of the Distant Lands special called Wizard City, which aired on the 3rd of September, 2021, Magic Man is no longer Magic Man. He is Normal Man. He runs the Wizard University. He is, for the first time in centuries, useful in a way that does not involve revenge. He has, in his own halting way, accepted what Golb took from him, and decided to live in spite of it. It is one of the smaller redemptions in the show. It is one of the most earned. We should now turn to the elementals, because the four of them are one of the few pieces of the show's lore that is structured into something resembling a system. And because the cycle they belong to is one of the show's more elegant cosmological inventions, the four elements in the Adventure Time universe are ice, candy, fire, and slime. These are not the classical four elements. They are something the show invented for its own purposes. Each of the four elements is governed at any given time by an elemental being who embodies it. The position is not hereditary, although it sometimes appears to be. The position is, the show eventually reveals, reincarnated. When one elemental dies, the next one is born somewhere, often without knowing it. This continues across millennia. The four elementals of the Cretaceous period, Urgence Evergreen, Chatsberry, Balthus, and Slimy D, were not the first to hold those titles. And they were not the last. The titles continue. The position continues. The bearers change. The episode that lays this out most clearly is called Elemental, which is part of the 4-night Elements miniseries that aired from the 24th to the 27th of April, 2017. The miniseries is one of the strangest things the show ever attempted, because it is built around a slow, escalating apocalyptic showcase in which the four current elementals each take turns transforming the land of Oo into a hellish version of themselves. The current elementals in the present of the show are Patience St. Pim, the ice elemental who is the reincarnation of Urgence Evergreen; Princess Bubblegum, the candy elemental, who was created out of the sentient mother gum we will get to in a moment; Flame Princess, the fire elemental who is the daughter of the current Flame King; and Slime Princess, the slime elemental, who rules the Slime Kingdom and who is by some distance the least dignified of the four. The Elements miniseries begins with Patience St. Pim, who has been awake for less than a season at this point, deciding that the natural state of the world is for the four elementals to take their full cosmic forms and rule. She gathers the other three. She uses an artifact to push each of them past the threshold of their elemental nature. Each of the four kingdoms transforms. The Candy Kingdom becomes a sticky, sugary trap that absorbs every living thing inside it into a candy version of itself. The Fire Kingdom becomes a sea of magma that incinerates anything it touches. The Slime Kingdom becomes a gelatinous pit that drowns anything that falls into it. The Ice Kingdom becomes a screaming wasteland of frozen people, all of them having the worst day of their lives, locked in time. The four elementals in their cosmic forms are barely aware of the lives they are destroying. They are doing what they were made to do. The miniseries is resolved by Betty, who is at this point still trying to fix Simon, and who uses the chaos of the elemental apocalypse as a cover for her own work. The audience does not entirely understand what she has done, except that by the end of the miniseries, the four elementals have been calmed, the kingdoms have been restored, and Simon has been briefly returned to himself, although the crown reclaims him within the hour. The Elements miniseries is, in some ways, the show's grimmest stretch. The episodes are not loud, they are quiet and slow and slightly nauseating, and they keep the audience in a state of background dread for almost their entire runtime. The reason the miniseries works is that it shows the audience for the first time what the show would look like without restraint. The elementals are the show's reminder that the magic the characters use all season, every season, is dangerous. The kingdoms run on it. The kingdoms are also one bad day away from being unmade by it. There is more to be said about Patient St. Pym, who is one of the show's stranger antagonists, and about the way she rediscovers her identity across the 7th and 8th seasons. She wakes up in an episode called The Hall of Egress, frozen in a block of ice she had encased herself in shortly before the Mushroom War. She had not realized the war was coming, exactly, but she had sensed something and had decided to wait it out by going into stasis. She wakes up roughly 1,000 years late. She is alone. The other 3 elementals of her generation are long dead. She is the last of her line still in the original body. She is also the reincarnation of Evergreen, although she does not initially know it, and she carries forward Evergreen's particular kind of cold confidence, his certainty that he knows best, his willingness to freeze his peers when they disagree. The audience watches her, over the course of the 7th season, gradually realize who she used to be, and then gradually decide to act on it. The Elements miniseries is the result. She is defeated at the end of the miniseries, but she is not killed. She is left calm, recomposed, in her own ice kingdom, watching the snow. The show does not pretend she has been changed. She is who she is. She is the cold edge of the season. She will, the show implies, try again. The cycle continues. Reincarnation, of course, is part of the cycle. Evergreen had been an ice elemental. Patience was now the ice elemental. When she died, a new one would be born, somewhere, possibly without knowing it for years. The role would continue, even if the person did not. We can now talk about the founders, because the question of what happened to the humans is one of the show's longest-running mysteries, and one of the ones it eventually answers in the most detail. The premise of Adventure Time from the first episode is that Finn is the only human. He is treated as the only human. He believes he is the only human. The show, for its first 3 seasons, allows the audience to believe this too. There are hints of other humans here and there. Susan Strong, who shows up in a memorable first season episode called Susan Strong, is implied to be a human, although she does not speak English at first, and her exact species is left ambiguous for many seasons. But for most of the early run of the show, the working assumption is that the Mushroom War wiped out human civilization, and that Finn, by some accident of biology and circumstance, is what is left. The show is comfortable with this. The show, in its first 3 seasons, treats Finn's loneliness in this respect as a fact of life rather than a mystery. Then, in the 5th season, the show begins to push on it. An episode called The Visitor, which aired on the 23rd of June 2014, introduces Finn's father, who is human and who, as the audience quickly realizes, alive. The father's name is Martin Mertens. The father is, in every way that matters, a piece of work. He is charming. He is irresponsible. He is a con artist. He had, at some unspecified point, abandoned the infant Finn in the wild and disappeared. The episode is structured around Finn meeting his father for the first time, asking him the questions a 14-year-old asks of an absent father, and slowly understanding that the answers he is getting are not honest. Martin does not stay. Martin leaves. Finn does not know why his father is the way his father is, and the show, for a long time, refuses to explain. The show finally explains in the Islands miniseries, which aired from the 30th of January to the 2nd of February 2017, across 8 episodes of the show's 8th season. The miniseries is one of the most narratively dense single stretches in the entire run of Adventure Time, and it is, by some distance, the largest single lore drop the show ever performs about the post-war human story. Finn, Jake, BMO, and Susan Strong leave Ooo by boat, sail across the ocean, and travel to a chain of islands that none of them had previously known existed. The islands are, the audience comes to learn, where the human survivors of the Mushroom War went. The cosmology of the Founders is a small and gentle horror. The first generation of post-war humans realized very quickly that the land was no longer safe. The radiation, the mutants, the magic, which had begun returning to Earth in the aftermath of the war, was not always friendly. They built shelters, they built submarines, they moved offshore. Eventually, after several generations of work, they settled on a chain of islands far from any major landmass, and they fortified the largest of them, which they called Founders Island, against everything. They built a barrier of bioengineered creatures around it. They built a colossal guardian the size of a hill, programmed to attack anything approaching the island that was not human. They built a society on top of all of this that was, in its way, peaceful, prosperous, and absolutely terrified. They had survived. They were not going to risk losing it again. The society on Founders Island, by the time the miniseries finds it, has been running for several hundred years. It is run, more or less, by a single being. Her name is Minerva Campbell. She is originally a doctor. She is also, the audience learns through flashbacks, Finn's biological mother. She had, several decades before the present, uploaded her consciousness into the island's web of computers in order to continue serving the human population after a deadly virus had been accidentally released by a colleague. 62% of the human population died in that outbreak. Minerva, in stasis as a digital intelligence, became the founder of a network of robotic helpers who tend to every aspect of the population's lives. The helpers heal injuries. The helpers raise children. The helpers tuck everyone in at night. The price for this is that no one is allowed to leave. The price for this is that anyone who tries to leave is chased down by a class of citizens called Seekers, who are mind-controlled by a different scientist named Dr. Gross. The price is total safety and total isolation and total dependence on a system that does not allow doubt. The story of how Finn was born is, by the time it is revealed, a small private tragedy. Martin Mertens, Finn's father, had been a hider, a citizen who repeatedly tried to escape the island. Minerva had been a helper. They had met when Martin had been injured during a previous escape attempt. They had fallen in love. They had had Finn. They had lived a brief illegal domesticity together, and then a faction of citizens, angry about something Martin had done years earlier, had ambushed him. He had escaped onto a boat with the infant Finn. The island's colossal guardian, programmed to attack anything leaving the island, had attacked the boat. Martin had been separated from the baby. The baby had drifted out to sea on a piece of the boat. The baby had eventually washed up on the shore of Oo, where he had been found by a dog couple named Margaret and Joshua, who raised him as their own son alongside their biological son Jake. Martin had ended up somewhere else, by routes the show does not entirely explain, and had become the man Finn would eventually meet, who was no longer interested in being a father. Minerva had spiraled into depression, had eventually uploaded herself into the network, and had spent the next decade and a half trying to find her son. Finn finds her in the miniseries. The reunion is rendered, animated, with a great deal of gentleness. Minerva, who exists now only as a virtual presence projected through the helpers, looks at Finn as if he is the answer to a question she had stopped allowing herself to ask. She tells him she had thought he was dead. She tells him she is sorry. She tries, in the way an absent mother who is also a digital intelligence might try, to keep him on the island. He almost stays. He decides, in the end, to go home. The reasoning he gives is the reasoning a 14-year-old gives, which is that he has friends, that he has a brother, that he has a life. Minerva accepts this. She does not, as the show is careful to note, fully understand it. The helpers are her purpose. The island is her domain. The world outside is, in her understanding, a place of danger and suffering. Finn tries to explain to her that it is also a place of meaning. He does not entirely succeed. He hugs her in the form of a virtual avatar she has constructed for the meeting. He says goodbye, he gets on the boat, he sails home. The miniseries also reveals the truth of Susan Strong, who has been a recurring character since the first season, and who has been Finn's friend for years without either of them realizing they were the same species. Her real name is Kara. She was raised on Founders Island. She was, originally, a seeker, a citizen whose role was to hunt down escapees. She was good at her job. She had, in her youth, betrayed her closest friend, a hider named Frida, to Dr. Gross. After Frida had confided in her about plans to escape, Susan had spent the next several years operating under the Founders' plan, until a malfunction in her mind control implant, combined with an injury, had wiped her memory and sent her drifting in the same way Finn had drifted, until she had landed in Oo. She had been adopted by a community of mutated fish people in the sewers of the Candy Kingdom. She had become, eventually, friends with Finn, without knowing that he was the other half of her old story. The Islands miniseries is, in part, the recovery of her memory. She finds Frida again. She apologizes. She does not get forgiven so much as quietly let off the hook. She and Frida decide at the end of the miniseries to leave the islands together and travel the world, which is the closest either of them gets to absolution. The bigger story, the one underneath all of this, is what the Founders represent in the show's larger arc. The Founders are what the show is interested in saying about safety. The Founders are also what the show is interested in saying about the price of safety. The humans on the island have survived. They have, by any reasonable metric, succeeded at the only project that had been available to them after the war. They are alive. Their species continues. They have built a stable society, and the price they have paid is that they are no longer adventurous. They are no longer curious. They are no longer brave. They are, when Finn finds them, sitting in their cubicles eating food the helpers have prepared for them, waiting to be tucked into bed. Minerva, the founder of the helper system, tells Finn gently that this is what she had wanted for him. He gently tells her that he prefers ooh. The miniseries leaves the question open. Neither side has been convinced. The humans, after Finn's visit, mostly choose to stay. A handful leave with Frida and Susan. Most of them remain on the island, in their cubicles, in their safety for the rest of their lives. This is, by some readings, the most quietly mature thing Adventure Time ever did. It refuses to declare a winner. It refuses to say the island people are wrong, although it strongly implies that the price they have paid is too high. It refuses to say Finn is right, although it lets him leave with his dignity intact. It treats the humans not as cautionary tales, but as people who have made a reasonable trade, and who are entitled to live with the trade they have made. The fact that the show was willing to do this, in an 8-episode arc aimed nominally at children, is one of the reasons Islands is, by most fans' accounts, one of the best stretches of Adventure Time ever produced. We have one more major thread, and then we will close. Princess Bubblegum, in the present of the show, is the ruler of the Candy Kingdom, a small medievalish nation built into the side of a soft pink mountain near the center of the land of Ooh. The Candy Kingdom is populated almost entirely by sentient candy people, gumdrops, peppermints, cinnamon buns, lollipops, candy corn citizens, and so on. Bubblegum rules over them as a benevolent absolute monarch, with a heavy emphasis on science. She is, in any given episode, building a new weapon, performing a new experiment, decoding a new piece of pre-war data, or quietly running surveillance on a citizen she suspects of misbehavior. She is sometimes ruthless. She is usually correct. She is loved by her citizens, although she would, the show implies, have her position even if she were not. The audience does not begin to understand who she really is until the 7th season, and the audience does not begin to understand where she came from until the 9th. What we eventually learn is that Bubblegum is approximately 800 years old, in the present of the show. She does not look it. She presents externally as an 18-year-old woman, although she is by every metric one of the oldest beings in Ooh. She was not originally a princess. She was not originally a person, in the strict sense. She was born from a substance called the Mother Gum, which was in the period after the Mushroom War, a vast sentient mass of bubblegum that grew in a particular crater in the post-apocalyptic landscape. The Mother Gum was alive. The Mother Gum was, in some way, conscious. The Mother Gum extruded over time a series of small individual gum people, each of whom split off from the main mass and became a separate life. Bubblegum was one of these. Her brother Nettie, who is a slow, gentle, dragon-like creature who lives at the center of the Candy Kingdom, and who is one of her dearest companions, was another. The two of them, the show eventually shows, are fraternal twins of the Mother Gum. The episode that finally walks the audience through Bubblegum's origin is called Bonnie Bell Bubblegum. It originally aired on the 17th of September 2017. The framing is small. Bubblegum, Finn, Jake, and Marceline are relaxing in a pool of apple cider. Finn hands Bubblegum a cup. The cup reminds her of a cup her uncle used to own. Finn gently asks her about her family. Bubblegum reluctantly tells the story. She had been very young, very lonely. In the period after she had split off from the Mother Gum, she had been wandering the post-apocalyptic wasteland, scavenging, building a small life for herself and Nettie. She had wanted family. She had decided to make some. She had bioengineered, from large pieces of gum, 3 new people, an aunt named Lolly, a cousin named Chickle, and an uncle named Gumbald. Each of them was modeled after a face she had found in a pre-war photograph. Each of them was made adult, although Bubblegum herself was still a child. They lived together for some time in a small cabin she had built. They planted taffy trees. They were, for a while, happy. The uncle, Gumbald, became the problem. He developed ambition. He proposed building a city. Bubblegum, who was both younger than him and more powerful than him, vetoed the city. She used a butterscotch bomb to flood the proposed site with a lake. Gumbald began to resent her. He began to plan. He developed a chemical called dum-dum juice, which would, if administered, render the drinker simple-minded and pliable. He proposed using it on Bubblegum, his own creator, who was at that point still physically a child. He demonstrated it on his co-conspirators, Lolly and Chickle, who became Manfred the Talking Piñata and Crunchy the Candy Ball, respectively. Bubblegum, in the doorway, witnessed this. She tried to stop him. He turned on her. There was a struggle. Bubblegum, in self-defense, used a pea shooter to break the flask of dum-dum juice in his hand. The juice splashed on his face. He transformed instantly into a talking punch bowl named Punchy with no memory of who he had been. That, the show eventually reveals, is how the Candy Kingdom started. Bubblegum, in the wake of having unmade her own family, looked around at the simple-minded versions of them and decided, against her own grief, that they seemed happier this way. She kept them. She built a kingdom around them. She added more candy people, made in their image, designed gently so that they would be content rather than ambitious. She gave herself the title of princess because Gumbald had used the word as a condescending nickname for her, and she decided to take it back. She built the Candy Kingdom as a place where her created family could live, indefinitely, happy, mostly oblivious to what had been done to them. She did this when she was, in physical terms, still a young girl. She has been doing it ever since. The implications of this, the show is careful to draw out, are not flattering to Bubblegum. She rules a kingdom of beings she has dumbed down because she was afraid of what would happen if she did not. She has lived every day with the knowledge of what her own family had wanted to do to her, and with the knowledge of what she had done to them in response. She is, by some readings, one of the most quietly damaged characters in the entire show, and her famous tendency toward control, toward surveillance, toward dictating every aspect of her citizens' lives is the long output of an 800-year-old child who has decided on the basis of one early traumatic experience that the only safe form of love is the kind you can supervise. The audience does not get the full payoff of this until the show's series finale, in which the Punch Bowl Gumbald, accidentally restored to his original form by a different magical event, gathers an army and attempts the same coup he had been planning 800 years earlier. The Gum War, as it is called, occupies the back half of the 10th season and most of the final hour of the show. It does not end with Bubblegum killing Gumbald, although she comes close. It ends with Finn and Jake, in a fit of inspiration, dosing the battlefield with a substance called nightmare juice, which puts everyone present into a shared dream state in which the conflicts of the waking world feel small and the connections between people feel large. Bubblegum and Gumbald, in the dream, are forced to look at each other across 800 years of resentment. Neither of them is fully right. Neither of them is fully wrong. Bubblegum, looking at the uncle she had made and then unmade, finally tells him the truth, which is that she had been a lonely child and had wanted a family and had not known how to share power. Gumbald, in the dream, finally tells her the truth, which is that he had been built to be her equal and had not been allowed to be one. The dream does not resolve the conflict. The dream lets the conflict be held briefly by both of them, with their hands. When everyone wakes up, the dum-dum juice accidentally released across the entire battlefield by one of Gumbald's failed attacks has turned Gumbald back into Punchy and his army back into ordinary candy people. The Gum War ends. The kingdoms are returned to themselves. The cycle again continues. There is one more thing to say about Bubblegum, and we will close her section with it. Across the run of the show, Bubblegum is in some ways the most lonely of the main characters, although the show rarely lets her admit it. She is older than every friend she has, except Marceline. She is more powerful than almost everyone she meets. She is, by virtue of being the kingdom's monarch, structurally separated from the people she loves. The show keeps showing her in moments of small private failure, a scientific experiment that goes wrong, a citizen she had cared for who dies, a relationship she had been counting on that does not survive the choices she has made for her kingdom. She does not get a clean resolution to most of these. She just keeps ruling. She keeps building. She keeps experimenting. She keeps, in her own way, trying. The series finale gives her, at the very end, the one resolution it can give her, which is a quiet moment of mutual recognition with Marceline, in the foreground of a frame that contains the rest of the cast going about their lives. The moment is small. It is, in its own way, enough. There are several more threads to pull before we close, and you are still here, and it is still quiet, so we should pull them now. The first one goes upward, away from the surface of Ooh, into the cosmology that sits above the events the show is mostly about. The Lord of Evil, you may have noticed, has a boss. The boss has a boss. The boss of the boss is asleep, and the room where the rules of the universe are negotiated is a small, mostly empty pink room in which a friendly, two-dimensional figure named Prismo lives. Prismo is introduced to the audience in the two-part 5th season story Finn the Human and Jake the Dog, which aired together on the 11th and 18th of March 2013. The story is, on its surface, about the Lich. The Lich, defeated in his last appearance, has used the dying breath of his power to wish his way into the multiverse, looking for the one being capable of granting unlimited wishes. He finds him. Prismo is a wishmaster. Prismo lives in the Time Room, which is a place that the show carefully implies exists outside the regular flow of cause and effect. From the Time Room, anything can be wished. Prismo is the gatekeeper of that power. He is also, structurally, a low-level cosmic functionary. He looks like a piece of paper. He is shaped roughly like a man, but flat and pink and projected onto a wall. He is friendly. He is informal. He calls his clients buddy. He eats imaginary food. He watches imaginary television. He is, in every observable way, just a guy. The complication, which the show takes a long time to unpack, is that Prismo is not actually a person. Prismo is a dream. There is, somewhere in the cosmic background, an entity the show calls the Old One. The Old One is asleep. The Old One has been asleep for a very long time. The Old One is dreaming, and Prismo, the friendly pink wishmaster in the time room, is what the Old One is dreaming. If the Old One ever wakes up, Prismo will simply stop. If the Old One ever stops dreaming about that particular wall, Prismo will stop. Prismo is aware of this. Prismo does not seem especially troubled by it. He performs his job. He grants wishes. He goes home in some sense when his shift ends, although the time room does not really have an outside, and Prismo does not really have a home. The Lich in the original 5th season story kills Prismo. He does this by intimidating Prismo's body, the projected one, the one in the time room, into making a wish that, by the rules of the time room, immediately erases the wisher. Prismo, faced with the choice of having the Lich wish for the end of all life, makes the only countermove available to him, which is to wish for the death of his own dreamer. The Old One dies. Prismo, in the same instant, ceases to exist. The time room blinks out. The Lich is left in a void. Finn, who has been pulled into this version of the multiverse by the same chain of wishes, finds himself in an alternate timeline that the show calls Farmworld. Farmworld is one of the show's most unsettling inventions, and we should sit with it for a moment because it answers a question almost no other piece of the show answers. In Farmworld, the Lich never arose. The Mushroom War still happened, but at the critical moment, the bomb that would have ended human civilization was stopped in midair by a man with an ice crown on his head. That man was Simon Petrikov. In Farmworld, the crown's energy was enough to absorb and dissipate the bomb. Simon, in the act, was destroyed. His body became part of the ice. The world did not end. The humans continued. Farmworld is, in the present day of the show, a quiet, low-magic, almost rural place. Marceline never became a vampire there, because she never had to. She lives on a farm with her grandmother. She raises pigs. She is, in Farmworld, a normal human woman who is aged at a normal rate, and who is therefore, by the present day of the show, an elderly woman with white hair and arthritis. Finn meets her. He does not, at first, recognize her. She tells him stories. She is gentle. She tells him that the Lich never came because Simon stopped the bomb. She tells him that the price of stopping the bomb was Simon. She tells him she remembers Simon and that he was kind. The Farmworld version of Finn, the boy Finn would have been if the world had not been broken, has been alive in this timeline as well, although he is not the hero of his own life. He works at a fish cleaning operation. He is missing an arm. He is unhappy. He is in some sense the rebuke the show is willing to offer to its own premise. Without the Mushroom War, the boy Finn would have been is small. The Lich finds Farmworld. The Lich kills Marceline's grandmother. The Lich attempts to find a way out. Finn, in Farmworld, retrieves the ice crown from Simon's frozen remains and puts it on. He wishes for the Lich to never have existed. The crown grants the wish, but the wish has a price, which is that Finn, by putting the crown on, has begun the same transformation Simon began. He is becoming the new Ice King. He is starting to hear the visions. He is starting to forget. The Lich is gone. The world is, for a moment, saved. And Finn, in the final shot of the Farmworld episode, looks at himself in a frozen lake and does not entirely recognize his own face. The show, generous as it is, sends our Finn home before the transformation completes. Farmworld Finn keeps walking. The Farmworld timeline continues, somewhere with its own Ice King who is no longer Finn but is wearing his body. The show returns to him exactly once, much later in an episode called Crossover. He has not gotten better. He calls everyone Gunter. Prismo is restored, eventually, by Jake, who has been quietly mourning his friend for a season and a half. Jake makes a wish in a follow-up episode called Wake Up that the Old One be restored. The wish is granted. Prismo comes back. He is a little different, the show implies, although he does not say so. He has, in the period of his non-existence, known what it is like to not be dreamt. He is, when he returns, slightly more thoughtful. He goes back to his job. He grants wishes. He watches television. He never tells Jake what he saw. Jake never asks. The multiverse, you should understand, is real in the cosmology of the show, but it is also fragile. Every wish made through Prismo creates a new branch. Every branch contains a complete version of every event, with one variable changed. The time room sits at the center of all of these branches, and from inside it you can see all of them at once. The Old One dreams them, Prismo facilitates them, and the Lich who wanted to end all of them was only stopped because the gatekeeper of all of them was willing to die in order to deny him the privilege. That is, in a quiet way, the most generous thing any character in the show ever does. Prismo, who is in some sense not a real person, gave his entire existence so that the universes could continue. The show never says thank you on the audience's behalf. The show trusts that you will say thank you yourself. The next thread is the one that goes sideways, into the prison the show keeps mentioning, and almost never letting you see. The Crystal Citadel is a cosmic facility located somewhere outside the normal geography of O. It is a prison, although the show is careful not to use that word too directly. It is run by a class of beings who appear to be subordinates of Prismo, although their exact rank in the cosmic hierarchy is never specified. The Citadel houses at any given time several of the most dangerous beings the universe has produced. It also houses, less famously, a population of cosmic criminals who have committed crimes that the show treats as roughly equivalent to interstellar piracy. One of these criminals is named Martin Mertens. He is Finn's father. The episode that finally lets the audience inside the Crystal Citadel is called Escape from the Citadel. It aired on the 21st of April, 2014. Alongside its companion piece, Wake Up, the same two-part premiere that restored Prismo. The two episodes are structurally one piece. Finn, having spent the previous several seasons asking Prismo for his father's location, has finally been told. His father is in the Citadel. The Citadel is sealed. The only way in is to find a guardian called the Cosmic Owl, who appears in dreams to beings about to make important decisions, and to ride the Cosmic Owl into the Citadel through the dreams of an inmate. They do this. Finn and Jake arrive in the Citadel just as the Lich is also breaking out of it. The Citadel itself is a beautiful piece of design. The cells are made of crystal. The inmates are suspended, mid-pose. In the moment of their crime, their bodies turned into facets of their own punishment. The Lich is one of them. So, briefly, is Martin Mertens. Finn finds Martin in a cell, somewhere near the back. Finn has never seen his father. Finn has spent his entire life believing his father was dead. Martin is, when Finn finds him, in the middle of a long, slow attempt to talk his way out of his sentence. He is wearing a beard. He is missing one of his legs. He is, in some sense, in the worst shape of his life. He recognizes Finn instantly, although he has not seen the boy since Finn was an infant. He pretends not to. He spins a story. He claims, when pressed, to have been on a long, heroic mission. He tells Finn he is proud of him. He does not, the audience notices, say he loves him. He does not, in fact, say much of anything that turns out to be true. The Lich breaks out. The Citadel begins to collapse. Finn, in the chaos, tries to free his father. He partly succeeds. Martin, however, takes the opportunity to escape on his own, leaving Finn behind. Finn loses an arm in the process. The Lich, in the fountain at the center of the Citadel, is washed clean by what the show implies is the primordial substance from which all life originated. The Lich is reborn, as the audience understands later, as a small candy baby. Finn, bleeding, watches his father vanish into the void. The Citadel's guardians arrive, the escape is sealed. Finn goes home. His arm grows back as a flower. The flower will later grow into a sword, and that sword will later grow into the grass sword that will later create Fern. But we will get to that. The Crystal Citadel reappears, in passing, several times across the rest of the show. Its existence is one of the show's quiet pieces of background machinery. It is run by entities that we never get a clear look at. Its inmates are cataloged, the show implies, somewhere we are not invited to read. The Lich's escape from it is the worst thing that has happened to its administrators in living memory. They do not seem, however, to take it personally. The Citadel is a process. The Lich was a process. The escape was a process. Now they have a new process. The cycle continues, the fountain continues to flow. Martin Mertens, the father who walked away, reappears for the audience exactly one more time in an episode called The Visitor, which aired on the 28th of May 2015. He has by then been wandering for some time in the body of a small, mostly bald, middle-aged man. He has heard that Finn is looking for him. He has decided, for reasons that are entirely his own, to come find his son. The episode is brief. Finn meets him. Finn is by then no longer the child who had imagined his father as a hero. He is 15. He has questions. He asks them. Martin answers some of them with lies. He answers others with half-truths. He tells Finn he was born on a boat, which we know from the Islands miniseries is not exactly true. He tells Finn he loved his mother, which we have no reason to entirely doubt. He tells Finn he had to leave on an important mission, which is a lie. He spends the episode trying to recruit Finn into a smuggling operation he is running. Finn refuses. Martin leaves, again alone. He does not come back. The episode is, by some readings, one of the most quietly cruel single hours the show ever produced. The audience watches a 14-year-old boy meet his father, and watches the father weigh the value of having his son back against the value of the contraband he is moving across the sea. The contraband wins. Martin leaves. The episode ends with Finn watching his father's boat get smaller on the horizon. There is no resolution, there is no closure. There is only the small, slow, completely earned recognition that the absent father, having returned, is not somebody Finn wants to spend his life with anyway. That is what The Visitor is for. The show does not press it. The show lets it land where it lands. Sweet Pea, the small candy boy who emerged from the Citadel's fountain in the aftermath of the Lich's escape, is one of the show's quieter pieces of grace. He is raised in the aftermath by an elephant named Tree Trunks and a pig named Mr. Pig. The two of them had been trying for years to have a child together. The Lich, washed clean, came out of the fountain as a soft, candy-shelled, mostly bald, mostly content baby. They took him home. They named him Sweet Pea. They have raised him, by the present of the show, into a small, kind, mostly cheerful child who has no memory of having been the worst entity in the universe. He has nightmares sometimes about a green skull-faced figure with antlers. He does not know what the dreams mean. His parents tell him they are bad dreams. He believes them. He goes back to sleep. There is a moment late in the show in an episode called Whispers, which aired on the 20th of July 2017, in which Sweet Pea briefly accesses the part of himself that used to be the Lich, in order to defeat an alternate universe version of the Lich that has crossed over from Farmworld. The fight is brief. Sweet Pea, who is by this point a small child, looks for a moment as if he is going to become the antlered figure again. He does not. He pulls back, he returns to being a small candy boy, slightly tired, slightly disturbed by what he had just felt. His parents take him home, they give him soup. He sleeps. The Lich, in some sense, is still inside him. The Lich, in some sense, will always be, but what the show is willing to argue, what almost no other show would have been willing to argue, is that the same substance that produced the Lich can, with kindness and time and good parents, produce a small candy boy who sleeps through the night. The next thread is the one that goes downward, into the dimensions the demons live in. Hunson Abadir, Marceline's father, is one of the strangest pieces of cosmology the show ever introduces, because the show treats him as both a major figure and a low-stakes joke for the entirety of his appearances. He is the ruler of the Nightosphere, which is one of several adjacent demonic dimensions, and which the show treats as roughly equivalent to the underworld in a Greek myth. He is the Lord of Evil. He is, by the dictate of his title, the most powerful demon currently in operation. He is also, when he is on screen, mostly just a slightly insecure middle-aged man who is wearing a suit and who is talking, often loudly, about how much he loves his daughter while doing everything in his power to convince her she does not love him back. He is introduced in an episode called It Came from the Nightosphere, which aired on the 11th of October 2010 in the second season of the show. The premise is small. Marceline has an amulet. The amulet, if opened, opens a portal to the Nightosphere. Finn, who is a child who finds amulets interesting, opens it. Hunson comes out. Hunson, having been summoned to the surface of Oo, decides to make the most of his trip by eating most of the souls in the neighborhood. The episode is largely a chase, in which Finn and Jake try to stop a Lord of Evil from absorbing the population of the Candy Kingdom, while Marceline alternates between disowning him and apologizing for him. The episode ends with Marceline singing the Fry song to him, finally, after 1,000 years of not having had the chance. The lyrics, as you remember from earlier in this video, are about the day he ate her fries. Hunson hears the song. Hunson cries. Hunson tells her he is sorry. He tells her he had no idea the fries had mattered. He tells her he loves her. He is sucked back into the amulet. Marceline, who is now in possession of his amulet again, has the moment of closure she has been waiting for her entire adult life. The episode ends in something like peace. It does not last. Hunson, like a lot of fathers in this show, is not capable of sustaining the moment of clarity past the credits. He returns several times across the run of the show, and each time he does, he is incrementally worse at being a parent. He shows up to Marceline's home and rearranges her furniture. He shows up to her birthday and turns the cake into a screaming face. He shows up at the worst possible moments of her career and demands that she perform demonic songs with him. He is, you start to understand, a man whose entire identity is built around being the Lord of Evil, and who has, in the centuries since Marceline's mother died, lost almost all of his ability to remember that being the Lord of Evil is not the same as being a father. The episode that does the most with this is called Marcy and Hunson, which aired as part of the Distant Lands miniseries on Max in late 2021. The premise is that Hunson, having decided he wants to spend quality time with his daughter, kidnaps her and brings her along on a tour of the demonic dimensions. The tour is not, the audience comes to understand, a tour. It is a slow escalating attempt to convince Marceline to take over his job. Hunson is dying. The position of Lord of Evil is supposed to pass to him from his predecessor, and he is supposed to pass it to her. He has been planning this in some sense since the day she was born. He has never told her. He has assumed she will simply do it. He has not, in the meantime, learned how to ask. The episode is structured as the slow recognition on Marceline's part that her father has been planning her life without her consent for 1,000 years, and that the warmth he occasionally offers her is, in part, a strategic warmth designed to keep her in proximity for the day he asks. By the end of the episode, she refuses. The position passes to someone else. Hunson is, by the final scene, smaller than he has ever looked. He admits that he handled it badly. He does not, the audience notices, apologize for the centuries it took. He simply admits the most recent piece. That is the kind of apology Hunson is capable of. Marceline accepts it. The way you accept something you have been waiting a very long time for and have stopped expecting will come on its own terms. She hugs him. The episode ends. The Nightosphere itself, which the show visits several times, is one of the most carefully designed pieces of background lore in the series. It is a parallel dimension. It is populated by demons, although the show is generous about what counts as a demon. It has its own internal politics, its own internal economy, its own internal aesthetic. It has, you start to notice, its own implied bureaucracy. The Lord of Evil is, structurally, an elected position, or at least a hereditary one with conditional terms. There are, somewhere, demonic shareholders. The show never quite shows you the boardroom, but it implies it, and the implication is one of the show's quieter jokes, that even hell in the Adventure Time universe runs on paperwork. Hunson is not the absolute ruler of evil. He is the chief executive of evil. He has performance reviews. He is, in some sense, just a working man whose job happens to be the corruption of souls. That is the show's gentle suggestion. The audience can take it or leave it. The next thread is the one Bubblegum has been trying not to think about for 800 years. The Lemongrabs are Princess Bubblegum's most catastrophic biological experiment, and the show, across its run, treats them with a level of seriousness almost no other recurring storyline gets. There are, by the present of the show, 3 of them. The first one, who is called Earl of Lemongrab, or simply Lemongrab, was created some unspecified amount of time before the show begins, as Bubblegum's attempt to engineer a perfect candy person. He is instead a tall, screaming, perpetually distressed, sour, lemon-shaped man who speaks at maximum volume in a voice the show transcribes phonetically because no normal punctuation can contain it. He is unstable. He is angry. You start to understand within minutes of meeting him, profoundly, irreparably lonely. Bubblegum, having recognized her mistake, did the only thing she could think of, which was to give him a kingdom of his own and exile him to it. Castle Lemongrab, where the first Lemongrab lives, is a small, inhospitable region of Ooh, where he is, for several seasons, the only resident. He runs the kingdom alone. He yells at the empty rooms. He institutes punishments for crimes no one is committing. The show treats this in its early episodes mostly as comedy. The voice is funny. The volume is funny. The yelling is funny. By the 3rd season, the show begins to push on it. Lemongrab is not, you start to realize, a joke. He is a being who was made wrong, who knows he was made wrong, who lives alone with that knowledge, and who has been ruling a kingdom of one for as long as he can remember. Bubblegum, attempting to give him company, makes him a second Lemongrab. The episode is called You Made Me, and it aired on the 20th of August, 2012. The second Lemongrab is identical to the first, although marginally more stable. The 2 of them are, in theory, a family. They are, in practice, 2 beings who hate themselves and have been given each other to share that hate with. The show's most uncomfortable Lemongrab storyline takes place over several episodes in the 4th and 5th seasons, in which the 2 Lemongrabs, faced with a famine in their kingdom, populated by candy children Bubblegum has given them to raise, slowly begin to eat each other. The cannibalism arc is not played for shock. It is played deliberately, slowly, as the natural extrapolation of 2 beings who do not know how to take care of anything trying to take care of a kingdom. It ends with one Lemongrab having eaten the other and absorbed his body, becoming a much larger, much more grotesque, much sadder version of himself. This is by some distance the darkest sustained storyline Adventure Time ever runs. The show does not soften it. The show does not joke about it. The candy children in Lemongrab's care are for several episodes in real danger. Bubblegum eventually intervenes in an episode called Too Old, which aired on the 28th of October, 2013, and which is structured as the moment a much older Bubblegum, having grown back from her child state several seasons earlier, finally admits that her experiment has failed. She splits the absorbed Lemongrabs back into two beings. She redistributes the candy children. She tries to set the kingdom right. She does not entirely succeed. The two Lemongrabs continue to live together. They continue to argue. They continue, in their broken way, to try. The redemption of Lemongrab, when it finally comes, is one of the more surprising things the show ever does. In an episode called Mama Said, which aired on the 12th of March 2015, Lemongrab is shown, in a moment of unexpected quiet, taking care of the candy children. He has organized them into a small mountain. He has built them small rooms inside himself, the way certain real-world parents organize the inside of a house around the needs of children. He sings to them, in his strange, painful, sour voice, a lullaby of his own composition. The lullaby is not good music. The lullaby is, however, sincere. He is, in this moment, accidentally doing the work of being a parent. He has not been taught. He has not been shown. He is figuring it out. The episode does not narrate this. The episode just shows it in 3 or 4 small scenes and lets you draw your own conclusions. Lemongrab, the show is willing to suggest, is capable of love, even though he was made wrong. The candy children, the show is willing to suggest, are loved. That is, perhaps, the most generous thing Bubblegum's worst experiment ever taught her. There is a follow-up storyline across 2 episodes called Lemon Hope, which aired in 2 parts on the 4th of August 2014, in which a small lemon child named Lemon Hope, born inside Castle Lemongrab during the famine, escapes the kingdom, runs away into the wider world, and eventually returns of his own accord. He returns not because he wants to. He returns because he understands that the only being who can possibly free Lemongrab's children from the small unhappy kingdom they are trapped in is a small lemon child who has seen the outside world. He overthrows Lemongrab. He frees the kingdom, he leaves again. The show, generous as always, does not punish Lemongrab for being overthrown. The show simply shows you Lemongrab alone in his castle after the children have left, learning to live alone again for the second time. He survives it. He keeps going. He sings to the empty rooms. The cycle again continues. The next thread is the one Finn never got to keep. Billy is, in the original premise of Adventure Time, the greatest hero who has ever lived in Ooo. He is mentioned in the first season as Finn's idol. He has, by the time the show begins, retired. He is older. He has done his job. He has slain the monsters that needed slaying. He has, most importantly, defeated the Lich in single combat several centuries earlier, sealing him inside a glass tomb in a hidden chamber beneath the world. Billy is, in the early seasons, treated as a kind of cosmic insurance policy. As long as Billy is alive, Ooo is safe. As long as Billy has the strength to fight, the Lich cannot return. Finn meets him briefly in a first season episode called His Hero, which aired on the 13th of September 2010. Billy is by then no longer a hero. He has become a hermit. He lives alone in a cave by the sea. He has decided that heroism does not work, that violence does not solve problems, that the work he had spent his life doing has not made the world any better. He tries to teach Finn this. Finn, who is at this stage of the show 11 years old and full of certainty about things, does not really listen. Billy tries to mentor him into a gentler form of heroism. The episode ends. Finn and Jake leave. Billy stays in his cave. He watches the sea. The Lich finds Billy. The show does not show the fight. The show shows only the aftermath. The Lich kills Billy in the gap between 2 episodes, sometime in the early 4th season. Then the Lich, who is now in possession of Billy's body, walks into the Candy Kingdom wearing the face of the man Finn had grown up worshipping. The Lich uses Billy's body to manipulate Finn into retrieving the Enchiridion. The Lich uses Billy's body to lie to him about the cosmic threat. The Lich uses Billy's body to put a small green amulet into a wishing well. The wishing well, the audience learns, is a portal. The amulet, the audience learns, is a key. Finn, doing what Billy tells him to do, ends the season. The episode in which all of this comes together is called The Lich. It aired on the 22nd of October 2012. It is, by most fans' reckoning, the moment Adventure Time stops being a children's show in any traditional sense and becomes the strange, generous, melancholy thing it would be for the rest of its run. The reveal is small. The Lich's voice, coming out of Billy's mouth, is the show's worst thing. The audience watches Finn, who has trusted Billy his entire life, slowly understand that Billy is dead and that the thing wearing his body is the same thing that has been trying to end the world. Finn does not have time to grieve. The portal opens. The multiverse begins. The events that lead to Prismo, to the Crystal Citadel, to Sweet Pea, to everything we have already walked through, begin. Billy's actual death as a character is rarely shown. He appears occasionally in flashbacks. He appears in dreams. He appears in one quietly devastating sequence as a vision in the afterlife. Finn carries him, in some sense, for the rest of the show. The decision to grow up gently, the decision to refuse the comet, the decision to let his father walk away. These are all, in some sense, decisions Finn makes because Billy made them first, in the cave by the sea, and then died for them, and then was used by the worst thing in the universe to manipulate the boy who had loved him most. The show does not make this argument out loud. The show just lets Finn keep the lesson. The Lich, in his way, taught it to him. The next thread is the one that grew, slowly, in Finn's body from the moment his father walked away. After the events of the Crystal Citadel, when Finn lost his arm to his father's escape, he came home with a stump. The stump, after some time, began to flower. The flower bloomed. The flower fell off. From the soil of the flower's fall, a small green sprout emerged. Finn carried it with him for some time. He did not entirely understand what it was. The sprout, in due course, grew into a small green sword that the show calls the Grass Sword. The episode in which Finn finally takes possession of the Grass Sword is called Blade of Grass, and it aired on the 27th of November, 2014. The Grass Sword bonds at the moment of acquisition with the wielder. Finn, who has been told it is a normal sword, finds out shortly afterward that it cannot be removed from his hand. The sword is part of him now. The show does not, at first, treat this as a curse. The show treats it, for several seasons, as a small, ongoing inconvenience. The Grass Sword turns out to be more than a sword. It turns out to be a small, slow piece of evil magic, planted by a long-dead wizard, intended to take over the body of whoever wielded it. The takeover is incremental. The sword, the audience comes to understand, has been quietly siphoning pieces of Finn for months. By the end of the 7th season, the sword has accumulated enough of Finn's biological pattern that it is capable of expressing it independently. In the 8th season premiere, a 2-part episode called Two Swords, which aired on the 26th of March 2017, the Grass Sword finally crystallizes into a separate body. The body is, in every observable way, a duplicate of Finn. The duplicate has a name, although it does not yet know what to do with itself. The duplicate's name is Fern. We have already discussed Fern's death in the cold open of this video, so we should now discuss his life. Fern is, in his short existence, the longest sustained piece of identity horror in the show. He spends his entire conscious life trying to figure out which of him is real. He has Finn's memories, he has Finn's instincts, he has Finn's voice, although the show subtly pitches it lower to mark the difference. He does not, however, have Finn's body. His body is made of grass. He has, internally, the long, quiet certainty that he is going to be replaced as soon as someone notices. He spends most of the 8th season trying not to be noticed. Finn, who is one of the most generous protagonists in any animated series, simply accepts Fern. He treats him as a brother. He invites him to live in the treehouse. He fights alongside him. He shares meals with him. He does, in fact, do every observable thing a 13-year-old can do to make a grass clone feel welcomed. Fern is, by every reasonable measure, loved. Fern does not feel loved. Fern feels the show takes pains to show, like a smaller version of his original. Fern's resentment grows. The resentment is slow. The resentment is not Finn's fault. The resentment is, the show carefully implies, the natural condition of being told that you are a copy of someone who is loved, and being expected to be grateful for the privilege. By 3 buckets, the episode we opened with, Fern has decided to act. The decision is, in the moment, not entirely his own. The grass demon, the original wizard whose curse made the sword, has been whispering to him for some time. Fern, who is suggestible the way a small, lonely person is suggestible, listens. He traps Finn in a ziggurat. He attempts to replace him. He fails. He dies, accidentally, by Finn's weed-whacking robot arm, in a scene the show plays without music. Finn returns to the treehouse and weeps. Fern's remains are gathered into a bucket by Uncle Gumbald, who has plans. Gumbald restores Fern, much later, as the Green Knight, a much larger and much angrier version of himself, this time openly serving as Gumbald's enforcer. The second Fern, the Green Knight Fern, is what we see in the series finale. He fights for Gumbald, he fights against Finn, he nearly kills Finn. Then, in the dream state induced by the nightmare juice, he and Finn finally talk. The dream is the only place either of them is honest. Fern, in the dream, finally tells Finn what he has not been able to tell him for nearly 2 years, that he had wanted to be loved as Fern, not as a fin-shaped version of Finn. Finn, in the dream, finally tells Fern that he had loved him as Fern, but had not known how to say so because he had not realized Fern needed to hear it. The dream does not fix things. The dream simply lets the two of them finally see each other. Fern, freed of the grass demon, begins to dissolve. There is no body without the curse to hold him together. He asks Finn, gently, to plant him in the soil where the treehouse used to be. Finn promises he will. Fern dies in Finn's arms, quietly in the dream and in the waking world simultaneously. The seed remains. Finn plants it, the tree grows, the sword grows inside it. The show ends. The Finn sword, the one that grows out of the tree, deserves a sentence of its own. It is, the audience may not have realized on first viewing, not a new sword. The Finn sword had appeared earlier in the series, several seasons before Fern's birth, in an episode called Is That You? In that episode, Finn had encountered a doppelganger of himself, made of crystallized memory, who had been generated in passing by an act of multi-dimensional time travel. The doppelganger had not survived. His body had been compressed into the form of a sword. Finn had carried it. The sword had been lost. The sword, when it grows out of Fern's tree at the very end of the show, is in some sense every previous version of Finn condensed into one object. Fern's body becomes the soil. The Finn sword becomes the inheritance. The tree becomes the landmark. The next generation, finding the tree, retrieves the inheritance and continues. That is the show's final act of architecture. That is, in some sense, what the show was always about. The next thread is the one that goes all the way up. There are several cosmic beings above the level of Prismo and the Lord of Evil, and the show, careful as always not to over-explain, lets you glimpse most of them in passing. The first is Golb, who is a cosmic guardian. Golb is the one who imprisoned Ordalorg several million years ago, compressing him into a penguin. Golb is rarely visible directly. Golb is, however, present in a form the audience sees often, which is a four-faced flying head named Grob Gob Glob Grod, who appears in U as the patron deity of Mars. The four faces of Grob Gob Glob Grod are, the show implies, fragments of the same being fractured across different aspects of the same consciousness, the way certain mythological deities are described in old Indo-European religion. Magic Man, before he was Magic Man, was a Martian, and so Grob Gob Glob Grod is, in some sense, his god. The four faces appear, periodically, in U, usually to do something obscure, occasionally to render judgment on something Magic Man has done. They have a sense of humor. They have a sense of duty. They are structurally a long way down the chain from whoever made them. The Cosmic Owl is one of the things made by something further up. The Cosmic Owl appears in dreams. The Cosmic Owl is the one who shows up when a being is about to make an important decision, and who, by virtue of appearing, marks the decision as important. The Cosmic Owl does not give advice. The Cosmic Owl simply observes. The Cosmic Owl is, in cosmological terms, a kind of bookmark. He shows up when the universe wants to register what is about to happen. The Cosmic Owl appears, you start to notice dozens of times across the show, almost always in a dream, almost always in the background, almost always with no comment. The implication is that every important decision in the series is being watched. The implication is that you, the audience, are, in some sense, watching alongside the Cosmic Owl. The show does not press this. The show simply lets the Cosmic Owl exist. Maja the Sky Witch is one of the oldest still living magical beings in the present of O. The show introduces her in an episode called Sky Witch, which aired on the 19th of August, 2013. The premise of that episode is small. Marceline has lost Hambo, her stuffed bear, to a thief who has sold it to Maja for parts. Marceline and Princess Bubblegum, who are at the time in the middle of one of their longer cold periods, team up to retrieve the bear. The bear is, the audience understands, the most important object in Marceline's life. The episode is structured as the slow recognition that Bubblegum, who is in some sense responsible for Marceline's emotional state, is willing to give up something of her own value to retrieve the bear. The trade Maja eventually accepts is not the gold Bubblegum had brought with her. The trade Maja accepts is a small, slightly ratty t-shirt that Bubblegum has been wearing under her dress, which Marceline had given her decades earlier, and which Bubblegum has not taken off since. The shirt is, in cosmic terms, worth more than the bear because of how much Bubblegum loved it. Maja takes the shirt, Bubblegum gets the bear back. Marceline does not, in the moment, understand what Bubblegum has just traded. The episode does not explain it to her. The episode ends. Marceline, holding the bear, looks at Bubblegum a little differently. Bubblegum looks away. Maja, separately, is one of the few beings in the show implied to predate the Mushroom War. She is referenced in other episodes as having existed before the bombs. She is, in some sense, the show's reminder that magic was already present on Earth before the war, in small pockets, in old places, in the corners of the world the bombs did not reach. The war did not create magic. The war released it. Magia was already there. Magia is still there. Magia will presumably still be there long after the present of the show ends, watching, trading, charging fair prices for the things people did not realize they were going to need. Death is also a character in the show. Death lives in the land of the dead. Death is, in person, a tall, thin, pale man with a horse's skull for a head and a saxophone in his hands. He is courteous. He is musical. He runs the land of the dead with the casual professionalism of a small business owner who has had the same shop for several centuries. He is introduced in an episode called Death in Bloom, which aired on the 6th of December 2010. The plot is small. Finn and Jake have killed Princess Bubblegum's plant. They have to retrieve its soul from the land of the dead before she notices. Death is willing to negotiate. Death likes music. Death and Jake have a musical contest. Jake wins, barely. Death lets them take the plant's soul home. The episode ends. Death reappears periodically across the run of the show. He is, by the standards of the cosmology, a low-stakes presence. He does his job. He plays his saxophone. He runs the land of the dead. He is in the Distant Lands special called Together Again, which aired on the 20th of May 2021, the gatekeeper for the most important reunion in the show's epilogue. Jake, who has by then died of old age, is wandering the land of the dead looking for Finn. Finn, who is much older but still alive, has temporarily come to the land of the dead in order to find him. The two of them, after almost an hour of the special's runtime, are reunited. Death, who has been watching this whole time, allows it. He lets Jake go on one final adventure with his brother. The two of them, in the closing minutes of the special, set out together one more time. The show, in some sense, never ends. Death is the one who makes that possible. The last thread is the one the show told after the show was supposed to be over. When Adventure Time ended in September of 2018, with the series finale Come Along With Me, the audience generally understood that the show was over. The audience generally understood wrong. 2 years later, on the 25th of June, 2020, the streaming service, then called HBO Max, released the first of 4 one-hour specials under the umbrella title Distant Lands. The specials had been commissioned during the production of the show's final season, but had been shelved when the show was canceled. They had been revived for the streaming service. Each special focused on 1 or 2 characters, and each filled in a corner of the world the show had not gotten to. The first one was BMO. It aired on the 25th of June, 2020. It is, in some ways, the strangest single piece of Adventure Time the show ever produced. BMO, the small living video game console who has been one of the show's main characters since the first season, has throughout the original run been the most loosely characterized of the leads. He is a child. He is a friend. He is a robot. He is, occasionally, a soldier. His backstory has never been entirely clear. The Distant Lands special BMO finally fills it in. BMO, the audience learns, was originally manufactured on Earth by a man named Mo, who was an inventor in the period after the Mushroom War. BMO was the first of his model. BMO was, in some sense, the prototype Mo used to figure out what a sentient companion robot should be. BMO, after Mo died, traveled. BMO eventually ended up in space. BMO ended up, in the present of the special, on a small space station called Y5, where the inhabitants are dying because their air has stopped working. BMO saves them. BMO sings to them. BMO solves the problem with a small song that he composes on the spot. The way BMO has always solved problems, by being a child of impossible kindness who has, somehow, the technical literacy to be useful. The special is a science fiction story, and a coming-of-age story, and a piece of long-postponed character backstory, all at the same time. It is also, importantly, the first piece of Adventure Time the audience had seen in nearly 2 years, and the audience was, by the time the special aired, hungry. The second special, Obsidian, aired on the 19th of November 2020. It is, by almost every measure, the most beautiful single piece of work the show has ever produced. The premise is small. Marceline and Princess Bubblegum, who have at this point been together for a year and a half, travel to the Glass Kingdom, a region of post-apocalyptic Earth where the population is made of glass. Marceline had been there, briefly, 1,000 years earlier, in her younger and more reckless years. She had made promises. She had not kept them. The Glass Kingdom is when they arrive, on the verge of being destroyed by a dragon. Marceline has to face the dragon. Marceline has to face, more importantly, what she had done 1,000 years earlier and not come back to fix. The special is structured as one long, slow flashback through their relationship, interleaved with the present tense fight against the dragon. The songs are the centerpiece. There is a song called Monster, sung by Marceline, that is one of the saddest single pieces of music ever placed inside a children's animated property, in which the audience generally cannot get through on the first listen without crying. There is a song called Eternity with You, sung by both of them, that is one of the most quietly devastating love songs ever written for two cartoon women in their 30s or 30s. The special ends with the two of them reconciled, with the Glass Kingdom saved, and with the audience understanding, for the first time and in full, what the show had been quietly trying to tell them about these two characters since the second season. The third special, Together Again, aired on the 20th of May 2021. It is the death of Jake. We have already mentioned it briefly in the context of Death's role in the show's cosmology, but it deserves its own paragraph. Jake, in the present of the special, is dead. He has died of old age. His body is somewhere peacefully. His soul is wandering the land of the dead, looking for his brother. Finn, who is by then a much older man, somewhere between 50 and 60, has been told by Death that he can visit. He has accepted. The two of them, reunited, set out on one last adventure. The adventure is the death of the universe. The adventure is also small. The adventure is also, in some sense, every adventure they had ever been on together, in compressed form, with the knowledge that this is the last one. The special ends with Jake choosing to be reincarnated, and with Finn choosing to return to the living to keep being alive. They part. They will see each other again, the show implies. In whatever comes next, the land of the dead continues. Death plays his saxophone. The fourth special, Wizard City, aired on the 2nd of September 2021. It focuses on Peppermint Butler, who has been Bubblegum's loyal candy attendant for the entire run of the show, and who is, the audience may not have noticed, actually one of the older and more dangerous beings in OO. Peppermint Butler has spent decades performing dark magic in the shadows. He has done deals with demons. He has in some sense been carrying a small piece of the Lich in his pocket for years. The special is about Peppermint Butler enrolling in wizard school, run by Normal Man, who used to be Magic Man, and trying to learn magic the proper way, alongside students much younger than him. The special is gentle. The special is small. The special is, in some ways, the show telling you that even the smallest and most overlooked characters in the world have entire lives going on in the background, and that the show, given infinite time, could have told a story about every one of them. Wizard City is the show's reminder that there is always more. 2 years after Wizard City, in 2023, a separate series called Adventure Time Fiona and Cake premiered on what was by then called Max. The series consists of 10 episodes. It is set primarily in an alternate dimension where the gender-swapped versions of Finn and Jake that the Ice King used to write fanfiction about turn out to actually exist. The dimension was created, the series reveals, by an accidental wish made by Magic Man during one of his more unstable periods. The wish brought into being a self-contained universe in which Fiona the human and Cake the cat lived the same lives Finn and Jake had lived, but in a world that is, the series strongly implies, slowly running out of magic. Simon Petrikov, by then released from the Crown and living quietly in OO, ends up in Fiona and Cake's dimension by way of an experiment that goes wrong. He spends the series trying to find his way home, while Fiona and Cake try to figure out why their world is failing. The series, in its final episodes, reveals that the dimension Fiona and Cake live in is dying because Simon, in his original world, no longer believes in magic. He had been, without realizing it, the dimension's anchor. The series ends with him choosing, finally, to let go of the version of himself that had been Ice King, and with Fiona and Cake's dimension allowed to continue under its own power. Simon, freed of the last of his guilt, goes home. The credits roll. The cycle, somewhere, continues. That is, in some sense, the end of the show, after the end of the show. The original 10 seasons end with Come Along With Me. The Distant Land specials end with Wizard City. The Fiona and Cake series ends with Simon's release. After that, as of the moment this is being recorded, there is nothing new. The show has, for the first time in 15 years, stopped extending. The world of OO is, for the moment, complete. The cycle continues, in implication, off-screen, where the show is no longer watching. But the show has stopped narrating it. The fans have, in some sense, been asked to take it from here. There are a handful of smaller threads we should walk before the closing, because each of them, in its own way, contains an entire person. Her name is Tree Trunks, and she is one of the show's earliest recurring characters, having appeared in the first season as a sweet, gentle, slightly ditzy retired homemaker who bakes apple pies and lives at the edge of the forest. She is, for most of the show's run, treated as one of its softest characters. She is the kind grandmother. She is the soft voice that says nice things to Finn after he has had a hard day. She is, by every observable measure, the safest character in the cast. She is also, the show eventually reveals, an old, dangerous adventurer who has at various points in her long life traveled to the dimensions outside Wu, conducted business with cosmic guardians, and survived encounters that would have ended most of the show's other characters. The episode that begins to unlock this is called Tree Trunks in the first season, and which aired on the 10th of May, 2010, in which she insists on going on an adventure with Finn and Jake to retrieve a magical apple from a hostile region called the Evil Forest. The episode treats her insistence as comedic. She is too old for adventure, the audience is supposed to think, and she will probably die in a comedic way. She does die. The apple she retrieves is, the audience comes to find out, the Crystal Citadel apple, which is one of the magical objects connected to the cosmic prison we have already discussed. Eating the apple sends her body to a strange, shimmering pocket dimension, where she lives, briefly, with the Crystal Lich. She returns later. The audience comes to understand only because the cosmic guardians of the Citadel sent her back. The show treats her resurrection as a comedy bit. The show is being kind to the audience. The show is also, quietly, telling you that Tree Trunks has been across the cosmic border more times than most characters on the show have left O. She continues to grow stranger across the run of the series. She marries Mr. Pig, who is a small pig. She raises Sweet Pea, who is, as you remember, the redeemed candy form of the Lich. She has, in a late episode called Apple Wedding, which aired on the 14th of July 2014, an ex-husband who is a centaur. The centaur is named Wyatt. The centaur has been waiting for her for an unspecified number of decades. The episode is structured around the comedic awkwardness of an ex-husband showing up at the wedding of his ex-wife. The episode is also, more quietly, the first time the show invites you to consider that Tree Trunks has been alive for far longer than her appearance suggests, that she has had at least 2 prior marriages we have not been told about, and that the sweet, retired homemaker baking pies at the edge of the forest is, in some sense, a costume she has been wearing during a particularly quiet decade of an otherwise eventful life. The show never makes this explicit. The show simply lets you sit with the implication. Tree Trunks is, by some readings, one of the oldest still living mortal beings in the present of the show, and she has chosen, after centuries of adventure, to spend the rest of her time baking apple pies and raising a candy boy. That is the show's idea of a happy ending for her. The show, on her behalf, is right about it. Susan Strong, whose backstory we have already partially walked, deserves a fuller treatment because she is one of the show's most quietly built characters, and her arc takes a long time to resolve. She is introduced in the first season, in an episode called Susan Strong, which aired on the 16th of August 2010. She is, in that episode, the leader of a tribe of mutated fish people who live in the sewers underneath the Candy Kingdom. She does not speak English, she wears a hat that resembles a fish, she is unusually tall and unusually strong for any creature in Wu. She is, the audience may suspect on first viewing, a human. The show does not confirm this for years. Finn, on first meeting her, also suspects she is a human. He tries to teach her to speak. He tries to teach her to live in the surface world. He tries in some sense to recruit her into his loneliness, because he has spent his whole life believing he is the only one. She rebuffs him. She returns to the sewers. She lives with her tribe. Across the next several seasons, she reappears in small ways. She grows. She learns a few words of English. She begins, in some sense, to remember herself. The episode Butopia, which aired on the 15th of October 2012, takes Finn and Jake into the depths of her tribe's history, where they discover an underground city of perfectly preserved humans kept inside crystals, asleep. The implication is that the tribe Susan leads is descended from the humans who had been preserved by the city's original inhabitants, who themselves had been preserved by some earlier system. The chain of preservation goes back, the audience may infer, to the Mushroom War, or possibly earlier. The episode does not entirely explain the city. The episode simply shows it to you and lets you understand that there are levels of preservation and survival in this world that the show has not yet bothered to fully map. By the time of the Islands miniseries in 2017, the audience has, finally, the answer. Susan is a human. Her real name is Kara. She is from Founders Island. She had been a seeker, the class of citizens whose job was to hunt down escapees. She had betrayed her closest friend, a hider, named Frida, by reporting her to Dr. Gross. She had then, by injury and accident, lost her memory and drifted to Wu, where she had been adopted by the fish people, who had assumed she was one of their own. The reunion with Frida, in the miniseries, is the closure her arc had been quietly building toward for 7 years. She finds Frida. She apologizes. she is not forgiven so much as quietly let off the hook. The two of them, in the closing minutes of the miniseries, leave Founders Island together to make new memories. They are not seen again in the original show. The implication is that they continue, somewhere, off-screen, doing whatever it is two human women who have spent most of their lives in fear are finally able to do. The show, generous as always, does not press it. The next thread is the one Jake never asked too many questions about. Jake the dog is, on the surface of the show, a simple character. He is a magical dog, he can change shape, he can stretch his body to any size. He is Finn's adoptive brother. He is loyal, he is funny, he is in some sense the audience's stand-in for the kind of friend everyone wishes they had. He is, the show eventually reveals, also one of the strangest pieces of biology in the entire universe. Jake's father was named Joshua. His mother was named Margaret. The two of them had adopted Finn as an infant after finding him in the woods. They had raised Finn alongside their biological son Jake. Joshua had been an adventurer. Margaret had been a private detective. The show fills in these details slowly across several seasons in a small recurring set of flashback episodes. The most important of these is called Jake the Brick, which aired on the 7th of December 2014, and a follow-up called Joshua and Margaret Investigations, which aired on the 25th of January 2015. The premise of the flashback is that Joshua and Margaret, while pursuing a wanted criminal in the forest, encountered a creature that the show calls a shapeshifter. The shapeshifter attacked Joshua. The shapeshifter bit him. Joshua, after defeating the shapeshifter, returned home with what he assumed was a wound. The wound, however, was not just a wound. The wound was incubating something. Jake, the audience is invited to conclude, is not exactly Joshua and Margaret's biological son. Jake is, in some sense, the shapeshifter, reborn through Joshua's body. The shapeshifting powers Jake has all his life casually exhibited, the body that stretches, the form that changes, the impossible flexibility, are inherited from the creature that bit his father. Jake had, for most of his childhood, no idea this was the case. He had simply assumed his powers were a small mystery he did not need to investigate. By the time of the late seasons, however, the show has fully connected the dots. Jake is, biologically, half dog, half shapeshifter, and the implication is that he is, in some sense, the only one of his kind. The show is generous with him. The show does not turn this into a tragedy. The show does not punish Jake for being something other than what he had assumed. The show simply allows him to know, in the late episodes, that his origin is stranger than he had thought, and to continue being the friend and brother he has always been. Jake's relationship with his father, which we see in flashback, is gentle. Joshua loved him. Margaret loved him. They raised him well. The fact that his biological inheritance is partially monstrous does not, the show insists, make him a monster. He is what he is. He is what he chose to be. The shapeshifting was a gift in the end. The dog was the truth. Jake also has children. We need to talk about Lady Rainicorn because she is one of the show's most under-discussed major characters. And because her people are the one cosmic civilization in the show the audience gets a clear look at. Lady Rainicorn is a rainicorn, which is a species that resembles a unicorn crossed with a rainbow. She is Princess Bubblegum's loyal companion, mount, and friend. She is, by midway through the show, Jake's girlfriend. By the late seasons, she is his wife and the mother of their 5 children. She is also, the audience may not have noticed, an alien. The rainicorn species the show eventually reveals is not native to Ul. The rainicorns come from a place called the Crystal Dimension, which is a separate cosmic realm accessible only through specific portals. The Crystal Dimension is populated almost entirely by rainicorns. The rainicorns have their own language. The language is Korean. The show does not subtitle ladies' dialogue for most of its run, which means that an audience that does not speak Korean has been receiving, throughout the show, an incomplete view of who she actually is. The Korean dialogue, when translated, reveals that Lady is one of the show's most thoughtful and articulate characters. She has, in any given episode, opinions about everything. She has been politely withholding her opinions from the English-speaking characters, because they have not bothered to learn her language. The English-speaking characters, when they finally pick up enough Korean to follow along, are usually startled by what they hear. She is funnier than they had assumed. She is wiser than they had assumed. She is, in some sense, the smartest person in the room she is usually in. And she has for years been doing the work of cosmic diplomacy in a language nobody around her was bothering to learn. The show treats this as a slow, gentle joke at the expense of the English speakers. The joke is also, of course, on the audience. Lady and Jake have 5 children. The children are introduced in an episode called Jake the Dad, which aired on the 21st of October 2013. The children are part dog, part rainicorn, and they grow at unusual rates. They have names. They have personalities. They are, the show implies, mostly raised by Lady, with Jake helping when he can. Jake is, the show is gentle about pointing out, not a particularly involved father. He loves them. He is just not always there. The show does not punish him for this either. The show simply allows it to be true, the way it allows most things to be true. Jake is who he is. The children grew up loved. The cycle continues. The crystal dimension itself, which we glimpse in a few episodes, is one of the show's quietly mature inventions. It is a separate realm, populated by a separate species, with its own customs, its own architecture, its own politics. The Rainicorns are, by the show's hints, an ancient civilization that has chosen, on the whole, to remain separate from the rest of the multiverse. They have their reasons. The show does not press them. Lady, in choosing to live in Ooh, is in some sense a defector from her own world. She does not, the show is careful to note, regret it. She has chosen Jake. She has chosen Bubblegum. She has chosen Ooh. The fact that her people, somewhere, are still living their separate lives in the crystal dimension is, in her view, a comfort, not a wound. They are there, she is here. That is the arrangement. That is enough. The next thread is the one that goes back to Bubblegum's mountain. We have already discussed the Mother Gum, the sentient hive mind of Bubblegum, out of which Bubblegum and Nettie were born. We have not, however, said much about her later appearances. The Mother Gum is not, in the present of the show, dead. She is, instead, suspended underneath the Candy Kingdom, in a state of slow dissolution. Bubblegum visits her periodically in episodes that the show is careful not to play as either dramatic or sentimental. The Mother Gum, when she appears, is a massive pink mass of bubblegum, semi-conscious, occasionally extruding new gum people, occasionally absorbing the old ones. She does not speak. She does not, the audience may suspect, entirely think. She is a process. She is the substance from which bubblegum is, in some sense, still being made. She is the show's reminder that bubblegum is, biologically, an extrusion of an older being, and that the kingdom she rules is built on top of the body of her own progenitor. The episode that explores this most explicitly is called Bonnie and Nettie, which aired on the 8th of March, 2015. The premise is small. Nettie, Bubblegum's dragon snake brother, has fallen ill. Bubblegum has to take him underneath the kingdom to be healed. The journey takes them through layers of candy infrastructure, past sealed chambers, past forgotten rooms, into the chamber where the Mother Gum lives. Nettie, on entering the chamber, immediately attaches to the Mother Gum, drawing strength from her in the way a sick child draws strength from a parent. Bubblegum watches. She does not, the show is careful to note, attach to the Mother Gum herself. She has been away too long. She has, in some sense, become her own person, and the Mother Gum is no longer her mother in any operative sense. She watches Nettie heal. She walks home. She does not return to the chamber except when she needs to. The implication of all of this, which the show never makes explicit, is that Bubblegum has, in choosing to leave the Mother Gum and become an individual, performed her own version of the long human story of growing up and walking away from home. Nettie has not done this. Nettie has remained, in some sense, part of the Mother Gum, even as he has lived his own life on the surface. Bubblegum loves him for this. She also, in some sense, envies him for it. The Mother Gum is still down there. The chamber is still accessible. Bubblegum, who could return anytime she chose, has chosen not to. The cycle, again, continues. The kingdom continues to run on her absence. The Lemongrabs, as you remember, are also creations of Bubblegum. The Mother Gum is, in some sense, Bubblegum's creator. The same logic operates in both directions. Bubblegum has spent her entire conscious life making and being made, and the show is patient enough to let her wrestle with the implications. The Candy People are, in some sense, her children. The Lemongrabs are, in some sense, her children. Nettie is, in some sense, her brother and her son simultaneously, in the way that anything created by a being who was itself created blurs the categories of relation. The show does not draw this out. The show simply lets you sit with it. Bubblegum is, when you look at her closely, one of the most existentially complicated characters in modern animation. She rules, she makes, she loves, she continues. The last thread we will walk before the close is one we have mentioned in passing several times. It is the thread of Magic Man, whose entire existence has, by this point, been touched at multiple angles, and who deserves to be brought into a single frame before we go. Magic Man, as you remember, was born on Mars. He was a wizard. He had a wife named Margles. Golb took her. He came to Earth. He spent 800 years performing increasingly cruel pranks on the people around him as an expression of the broken thing he had become. He was, for most of the show's run, treated as a minor antagonist. He was the kind of figure the show would pull out for a single episode, Watch him do something terrible to a minor character and then put back. By the late seasons, the show had begun to take him more seriously, although the show had not, until the very end, fully forgiven him. The episode that lets him finally lay down the weight is called You Forgot Your Floaties, which we have already mentioned. He attempts in that episode to pass on his title of Grandmaster Wizard to a successor. He fails. The successor cannot bear the weight. Magic Man, in the moment, gives up the title to Betty, briefly. By an accident, the audience watches happen without entirely understanding what is being transferred. Betty becomes Magic Betty. Magic Man, freed of the title, becomes Normal Man. He spends the rest of his appearances in the show as a softer, more contained version of himself, slowly becoming less destructive, slowly becoming someone the other characters can be in a room with. By the Distant Lands Special Wizard City, which aired on the 2nd of September 2021, he is running the Wizard University. He is, by the standards of his earlier life, almost peaceful. The Distant Lands Special does not let him forget Margles. It also does not let her come back. The show is, on this question, gentle but firm. Margles is gone. She has been gone for 800 years. Whatever Golb took from him, the show implies, is not coming back. What Magic Man can do, the show suggests, is live with the absence. He can run his school. He can teach his students. He can, in some sense, become useful in a way that does not involve revenge. He has not been forgiven. He has not been redeemed. He has simply, after 8 centuries, learned to keep going. That is, in some sense, the most generous thing the show is willing to say about loss. You do not get over it. You do not solve it. You learn to keep walking. The cycle continues. The school stays open. The classes go on. There are still a few small lives in the corners of the show that deserve mention before we close, because each of them is, in its own way, the kind of quiet character the show kept producing without making a fuss about them. Cinnamon Bun is one of the candy people in the Candy Kingdom, and for most of his early appearances, he is treated as the dumbest. He is unbaked. The show uses this as a literal piece of biology and as a metaphor at the same time. Princess Bubblegum, who had created him at some point in the early history of the kingdom, had pulled him out of the oven before he was ready, and the result is a candy person whose brain has never fully finished forming. He is, in his early appearances, slow. He is forgetful. He is, by every measure the kingdom has, the lowest ranking candy citizen. He is also, the show patiently reveals across the seasons, one of the most quietly competent beings in Oo. He is brave, he is loyal, he is, when the situation calls for it, a surprisingly skilled fighter. He is, perhaps most importantly, kind to a degree the other characters around him are not always equipped to match. His arc, as the show is willing to develop it, centers on his decision to leave the Candy Kingdom and become Flame Princess's knight. Flame Princess is the elemental of fire in the present cycle, and we have not said much about her, although she is one of the show's earliest introduced princesses and one of its most interesting. She is, in her first appearances, a captive. Her father had imprisoned her inside a small glass lantern for being too volatile, and she had grown up inside that lantern knowing nothing about the outside world. Finn frees her. They date, they break up. She becomes ruler of the Fire Kingdom, which she had inherited rather than wanted. She is in her early reign overwhelmed. She does not know how to rule. She does not know how to manage a court. She does not have anyone she can trust. Cinnamon Bun shows up. He has, by some internal logic that the show treats as obvious, decided that what he wants to do with his life is be her knight. He is, as a candy person, structurally fragile around fire. The Fire Kingdom is, structurally, a place that should kill him. He does not die. He is somehow baked the rest of the way through by the ambient heat, and the version of Cinnamon Bun who emerges from the Fire Kingdom is, for the first time in his life, fully cooked. He is articulate. He is competent. He is wise in a way the show does not entirely explain. He had been, the show implies, this person all along hiding inside the underdone shell of his Candy Kingdom self. He had needed only the right environment to finish. The relationship between Cinnamon Bun and Flame Princess is, by most reasonable readings, the most successful platonic working partnership in the show. They run the Fire Kingdom together. They reform its laws. They survive several attempted coups by Flame Princess's father, who had been ousted and is angry about it. They are, by the end of the show's run, one of the few political units in Oo whose members are entirely satisfied with each other. The show treats this as small, off to the side, almost background. The show is, in fact, telling you something about kindness and patience and what people are capable of when the conditions are finally right. The next character is the smallest. Lemon Hope, as you will remember, is a lemon child born inside Castle Lemongrab during the cannibalism period. He is, by virtue of having been born inside a kingdom of suffering, one of the most unhappy small creatures the show ever puts on screen. He has, in his earliest appearances, no name. He is referred to only by what he is, which is a lemon child. He escapes, he runs, he travels the world. He returns, eventually, because he understands that the children he had been born among are still trapped, and that there is no one else who can free them. The two-part episode that gives him his name and his arc is called Lemon Hope, and it aired on the 4th of August 2014. The episode is structured, unusually for the show. He plays a flute, he travels, he meets a strange version of Finn, briefly. He has a vision. He returns to Castle Lemongrab. He defeats Lemongrab in a fight that is rendered by the show almost without violence. He frees the children. He leaves. He does not stay. He does not, in fact, want to be a hero. He had been forced into the position because no one else was going to do it, and once it was done, he had no further interest in it. The show, generous to him, lets him go. He is not punished for refusing to stay. He is not punished for not having loved the kingdom he came from. He is allowed, after one final act of moral courage, to walk into the wider world and pursue his own small life. He plays the flute, he travels, he composes music. He is, in some sense, the show's version of the kind of child who knew, from a very young age, that the only way to survive a difficult home is to leave it, and who had the patience to wait until they could. The show is on his side. The show does not romanticize the leave-in. The show simply allows it. The next character is one the show is gentle to in a way that is easy to miss. Lumpy Space Princess, who appears in the first season and who is one of the show's recurring secondary princesses, is, on the surface, the show's loudest joke. She is voiced in a deliberate piece of casting by Pendleton Ward, the show's creator. She has a deep, gravelly, distinctly masculine voice. She is shaped like a small purple cloud with stubby limbs and a single tooth. She is dramatic. She is obnoxious. She is, in every interaction, the worst possible version of a teenage girl. She is also, when the show gives her space, one of the most quietly sad characters in the entire cast. The episodes that give her room to breathe, Trouble in Lumpy Space in Season 1, which aired on the 8th of November, 2010, The Monster in Season 3, which aired on the 7th of November, 2011, and a handful of others, show you that she has run away from home, that her relationship with her parents is broken, that she lives, by her own choice, in the forest in a small shelter she has built for herself, and that she has, in some sense, opted out of the life her family had wanted for her. She is the Princess of Lumpy Space, which is a parallel dimension full of small purple cloud beings who all sound like her. She is not in her home dimension especially unusual. She is, however, unhappy there, and she has chosen to live in Oo instead, where her voice and shape and personality are, by the standards of the locals, ridiculous. She does not care. She has chosen this. She would rather be ridiculous in a place she likes than normal in a place she does not. The show, very quietly, treats this as a kind of courage. The fact that almost every character around her treats her as a joke does not mean the show is treating her as one. The show, when you slow down enough to notice, is treating her as someone who has paid the price of self-determination and is living, loudly, with that decision. That is, in some sense, why she is in the show. That is, in some sense, what she is for. The last character we will mention is one most of the audience never thinks of as a character at all, because he never appears in the present of the show. His name is Jay. He is Finn's other son. In the 5th season episode called Puhoi, which we mentioned earlier in the context of the first appearance of Golb, Finn falls into a pillow fort and ends up in a pocket dimension made entirely of pillows. He lives there. He grows up there. He marries a pillow woman named Rosalinen. He has 2 children with her, a son named Jay and a daughter named Bonnie. He becomes a king in the pillow dimension. He fights pillow wars. He grows old. He dies of old age in a small pillow bed, surrounded by his pillow family. The dimension lets him go. He is returned to his original body in Oo in the moment immediately after he fell into the pillow fort. No time has passed. The pillow family, however, exists. The pillow family, however, will go on living in the dimension after he is gone. He had a wife, he had children, he had grandchildren. He had, in some sense, a complete adult life that none of his friends back home will ever know about, and that he himself is supposed to forget. The episode does not let him forget. The episode ends with Finn back in his 11-year-old body, sitting in his bed in the treehouse, holding a small embroidered patch that the pillow family had given him on what had been his deathbed. The patch is real. It has come with him through the portal. It is, in some sense, the only physical evidence that the pillow life had happened. Finn looks at it. The episode ends. The show never returns to the pillow dimension. The show never tells you what happened to Jay or Bonnie or Rosalinen. The show simply allows the fact of their existence to sit off to the side in the audience's memory as a kind of small private grief. Finn had a family. The family is still there. They are aging. They are missing him. They will eventually die. And the patch is in his sock drawer somewhere in the treehouse, slowly fading. That is the kind of thing the show was willing to put inside an 11-minute episode aimed at children. That is, in some sense, why it is the show it is. There are more of these. We could keep going. We could talk about the Earl of Lemongrab's small mountain of children, who continue to live with him in the castle after Lemonhope leaves, and whom he, in his halting way, tries to raise gently. We could talk about Marshall Lee, the gender-swapped vampire prince from the Fiona and Cake dimension, who is voiced by Donald Glover, and who has, in his own dimension, lived an entirely separate millennium of his own life. We could talk about the Banana Guards, the Candy Kingdom's incompetent palace guard, who are, despite their incompetence, one of the show's tenderest pieces of background work, because each of them has a name and a small life and a small daily routine, and because the show, when it slows down, lets you see those routines in the corner of episodes that are mostly about something else. We could talk about Lady Lemongrab, the third Lemongrab made in the late seasons by the Earl of Lemongrab as a partner for himself, who is perhaps surprisingly one of the show's most stable late additions to the cast. We could talk about Peppermint Butler's small private library of dark magic books, which sit neatly organized in a basement under the Candy Kingdom, and which Bubblegum knows about and has chosen not to confiscate, because she has decided that her butler is allowed his own small private hobbies, even if those hobbies involve summoning demons. We could talk about Manfred the Talking Piñata, who used to be Aunt Lolly, who, after the events of the Gum War, is restored to Aunt Lolly, but who occasionally still says, in moments of stress, the phrase he used to say as a piñata, which is, "I don't know what's happening." We could talk about all of them. We could keep going for a long time. The show is generous. The show kept making characters. The show kept giving each of them a small piece of light to live in. There is a kind of through line to all of this, if we step back far enough. The through line is that everything in Adventure Time is older than it looks. Every character we meet is in some way a descendant or inheritor of something that happened before the show began. The crown predates Simon by 65 million years. Marceline predates Finn by 1,000. Princess Bubblegum predates her own kingdom by several centuries. The Lich predates the planet's current civilization. Golb predates the universe. The comet predates almost everything. The show is, in some sense, a small story being told inside a much, much larger one. And the small story is mostly about the small people inside the big one trying to figure out where they are, and what they owe to it, and what they can let go of. That is the kind of story Adventure Time kept telling in episodes that were 11 minutes long, in the margins of a children's show. We started this with Fern, the grass boy in the episode called 3 Buckets, who was born from a cursed sword and a careless wish, and who realized too late that he was not the person he believed himself to be. Now that we have walked through the rest of it, we can come back to him with different eyes. Fern was, in a sense, the perfect ending of the show. Every major character on Adventure Time in their own way had the same problem he had. Simon had been a man, then was something else, then had to find out who he was when the something else was taken off. Marceline had been a child, then was a vampire, then had to find out who she was when the vampire was taken off, and again when she put it back on. Bubblegum had been a piece of the mother gum, then was a princess, then had to find out who she was when she had built her kingdom on top of a tragedy she had partly caused. Patience, Saint, Pym had been evergreen, then was nothing, then had to find out who she was when her old self started speaking from underneath. Gunter had been Orgelorg, then was a penguin, then was a being who chose to ascend, then was a penguin again. Betty had been a fiancé, then was a wizard, then was part of Golb. Each one of them spent the show trying to figure out which version of themselves was the real one and which version was the costume. None of them got a clean answer. Fern, in the few seconds before he died, asked the same question in the same words that almost every character on this show has been asking the entire time. He asked, which one of us was real? He never got an answer. None of them did. The show is generous enough not to lie to them about it. There is one quiet detail in the finale that gathers all of this together. After Fern dies, Finn carries his seed back to the wreckage of the treehouse. The treehouse, you may remember, which had been the center of the show's geography for 10 seasons, and plants it in the soil where the treehouse used to stand. The seed grows almost instantly. It becomes a tree. The tree has, embedded in its highest branches, a sword. The sword is the Finn sword, which had been a kind of doppelganger of Finn himself, made of crystallized memory, several seasons earlier. The tree, in the centuries after the show ends, grows large enough that it becomes a landmark. Two children, generations later, find the tree, climb it, retrieve the sword, and set out on their own adventure. The show ends on those two children in the same pose Finn and Jake had been in during the opening credits of the first episode, 10 years earlier. The adventure continues. The cycle continues. The comet, somewhere out in the dark, is still on its schedule. The show was generous in a lot of ways. The way it was most generous, perhaps, is that it never lectured its audience about any of this. It just let the lore sit in the corners of episodes that were mostly about something else. It let the audience find it, or not find it, in its own time. It let the audience build the map for themselves. The map is large. The map is incomplete. The map will probably never be finished, but you have, by the end of all of this, at least the major landmarks. The crown, the child, the kingdom, the comet, the cube outside language, the island, the mother. The seed in the soil. If you found something in here worth carrying with you, into sleep, into morning, into whatever comes next, subscribing helps the channel keep making essays like this one, and it costs nothing. Sleep well. I will see you in the next one.